Some places don't add up correctly. The Paria Canyon Vermilion Cliffs Wilderness spans nearly 300,000 acres along the Arizona-Utah border. It is a landscape of sculpted sandstone, narrow slot canyons, and vast stretches of emptiness where cell signals die and compasses spin lazily in circles. The Bureau of Land Management maintains minimal oversight here. Rangers patrol infrequently. Hikers who enter are required to carry permits, but enforcement is sparse. The wilderness swallows people quietly, and most years at least 2 or 3 vanish without explanation. In the spring of 1987, a 6-person BLM survey crew was dispatched to conduct geological mapping and erosion assessment along the southern rim of Paria Canyon. The project was routine. Lead surveyor David Moss had worked federal land surveys for 11 years. His team included geologist Patricia Aldridge, cartographer Raymond Delgado, and 3 field technicians, Kenneth Brewer, Lisa Yamamoto, and Thomas Garrett. They carried standard equipment, theodolites, measuring chains, cameras, and handheld radios with limited range. The crew established base camp on April 9, 1987, near Buckskin Gulch, one of the longest and deepest slot canyons in the American Southwest. Their assignment was expected to last 3 weeks. By the 4th day, something was wrong. Each evening, the team gathered for a group photograph, standard protocol for BLM field operations, used to document crew composition and morale. On April 12th, when Patricia Aldridge developed the film back at base camp, she noticed an inconsistency. 7 people appeared in the frame. The extra figure stood slightly behind Kenneth Brewer, partially obscured by shadow. The face was visible, but unfamiliar. Aldridge showed the photograph to Moss, who counted the team members present. 6 people. He counted again. Still 6. They assumed it was a developer error or a double exposure. The next evening, they took another photograph. This time, the extra figure appeared on the far left, standing between Lisa Yamamoto and the canyon wall. The face was different, not the same person as the night before. Raymond Delgado examined both photographs with a magnifying loupe. The extra figures were not optical artifacts. They displayed the same depth of field, the same lighting, and the same grain structure as the rest of the image. They were photographed at the same moment, in the same physical space, but no one on the crew recognized either face. On April 15th, the team stopped taking group photos. Kenneth Brewer began noticing other inconsistencies. His field notebook, which he updated meticulously each day, contained entries he did not remember writing. On the morning of April 16th, he opened his logbook to find a detailed sketch of a rock formation he had not yet surveyed. The sketch included precise measurements and annotations in his own handwriting. Beneath it, a note. Survey. Completed April 18th. It was April 16th. That afternoon, the crew split into 2 groups. Moss, Aldridge, and Delgado continued mapping the canyon rim. Brewer, Yamamoto, and Garrett descended into a narrow side canyon to collect sediment samples. At 1400 hours, Garrett radioed base camp to report normal operations. At 1600 hours, when the group failed to return, Moss initiated a search. They found Brewer, Yamamoto, and Garrett sitting quietly near the canyon entrance, staring at the ground. None of them spoke immediately. When Moss asked what had happened, Yamamoto pointed to a set of boot prints leading deeper into the slot canyon. The prints were fresh. The tread pattern matched standard issue BLM field boots. Brewer's boots. But Brewer had not entered the slot canyon. He insisted on this. Garrett and Yamamoto confirmed it. The 3 of them had remained at the entrance, collecting samples within sight of one another. No one had walked into the canyon. Moss followed the prints. They continued for approximately 200 yards, then stopped abruptly at a sheer rock face. There was no indication of a turn, no scuff marks suggesting the person had climbed or backtracked. the prints simply ended. Delgado documented the scene with photographs and measurements. He noted the depth and clarity of the prints, the angle of the stride, and the surrounding terrain. In his report, he wrote, "Footprints consistent with adult male, approximately 180 pounds, standard hiking gait. No evidence of return path. No physical explanation for termination point." That evening, Moss reviewed the team's field logs. In Kenneth Brewer's notebook, on a page dated April 18th, 2 days in the future, was a detailed account of the boot prints. The handwriting was Brewer's. The entry described the exact location, the exact measurements, and the exact time of discovery. It ended with a single line: "Do not follow them back." The crew debated leaving immediately. Thomas Garrett argued they should complete the survey. Lisa Yamamoto refused to continue. Patricia Aldridge suggested contacting the district office, but their radio had limited range and no clear line of transmission to the nearest relay station. They would need to hike 12 miles to reach external communication. On the morning of April 17th, Raymond Delgado discovered his own surveying equipment had been moved during the night. His theodolite, which he had locked in a protective case, was found set up on the canyon rim, aimed toward a narrow crevasse. The lens cap was removed. The device was powered on. When Delgado checked the internal data log, it showed continuous operation for 72 hours, despite having been turned off and stored since April 14th. David Moss made the decision to abort the survey. The crew packed their equipment and began the hike back to the trailhead. Before leaving, Moss photographed the camp one final time. When the film was later developed, the image showed 8 people standing near the tents. No one on the team recognized the 2 extra faces. The Bureau of Land Management received Moss's incident report on April 23, 1987. The report was flagged for review and forwarded to the National Park Service, the U.S. Geological Survey, and an unnamed federal liaison office. No follow-up investigation was conducted. No additional survey teams were dispatched to the area. In 1991, Paria Canyon was redesignated as part of the expanded Vermilion Cliffs Wilderness, and public access was restricted to permitted day hikes only. Overnight camping in the specific survey area was quietly prohibited without explanation. Kenneth Brewer left the Bureau of Land Management in 1988. He declined multiple requests for interviews. In 2004, a journalist from a regional newspaper located Brewer living in Flagstaff, Arizona. When asked about the 1987 survey, Brewer said only, "We counted wrong. That's all. We just kept counting wrong." Patricia Aldridge continued working for the BLM until her retirement in 2009. In a written statement provided to a researcher in 2012, she confirmed the photographs and the boot prints, but offered no interpretation. She noted that the original film negatives were held in a federal archive and classified as administratively sensitive. Raymond Delgado died in 2016. His personal effects, donated to Northern Arizona University, included over 40 notebooks from his career. The notebook from April 1987 contains detailed maps, geological notes, and sketches. On the final page, in handwriting positively identified as Delgado's, is a single sentence written in red ink. "If you see yourself, do not approach." The Paria Canyon Vermilion Cliffs. Wilderness remains open to experienced hikers. Permits are required and closely monitored. Rangers report no unusual incidents. Search and rescue operations continue at a rate consistent with other high-risk wilderness areas. But every few years, a hiker submits a permit application that includes a group photo for identification purposes. And every few years, the ranger processing the application notices something slightly off about the head count. They never mention it. They approve the permit and file the photo, and they count again, quietly, just to be sure. There are places where sound goes to die. Canyon de Chelly National Monument occupies 83,000 acres in northeastern Arizona, within the Navajo Nation. The canyon system cuts through red sandstone in dramatic vertical walls that rise up to 1,000 feet. Archaeological evidence shows continuous habitation for nearly 5,000 years. The ancestral Puebloans built cliff dwellings into the canyon walls between 700 and 1300 A.D. The Navajo people have lived here since the 1700s. The land is sacred. Access is restricted. Visitors may enter the canyon floor only with authorized Navajo guides or by permit along a single self-guided trail. In 1996, the National Park Service documented the first official report of what would later be termed the Silence Grid. On June 14, 1996, a group of 4 hikers, led by certified guide Harrison Tsosie, entered the canyon along the White House Trail. The trail descends 600 feet to the canyon floor and leads to the White House ruins, one of the most photographed cliff dwellings in the American Southwest. The hike is considered moderate. The round-trip distance is approximately 2.5 miles. At 11:30 a.m., the group reached the canyon floor. According to Tsosie's incident report, filed 3 days later, the hikers proceeded normally for approximately 400 yards. Then, without warning, all ambient sound stopped. Tsosie described the experience in precise terms. The wind, which had been steady and audible moments before, produced no sound. Footsteps on gravel made no noise. When one of the hikers spoke, Tsosie saw her mouth moving but heard nothing. He attempted to shout. He felt the vibration in his throat but perceived no auditory output. The silence lasted approximately 90 seconds. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, sound returned. The wind resumed. Footsteps crunched on stone. The hikers could hear one another again. Tsosie immediately turned the group around and escorted them back to the trailhead. In his report, he noted the exact location using GPS coordinates and described the boundaries of the affected area as roughly circular, spanning a quarter mile in diameter. He recommended the trail be temporarily closed pending investigation. The National Park Service did not close the trail. Instead, they forwarded Tsosie's report to the regional office and requested a follow-up assessment. No assessment was conducted. Over the following 18 months, 7 additional incidents were reported. Each occurred in the same general area. Each described the same phenomenon: complete auditory cessation lasting between 1 and 3 minutes. Witnesses included park visitors, independent hikers, and 2 separate ranger patrols. In March 1998, acoustic researcher Dr. Ellen Kowalski from the University of Arizona visited the site with recording equipment. Kowalski specialized in natural sound phenomena and had previously studied echo patterns in canyon environments. She entered the area with a Navajo guide, Michael Benally, and a digital audio recorder capable of capturing frequencies beyond human hearing range. At approximately 2 p.m., Kowalski and Benally entered what they believed to be the silent zone based on GPS coordinates from previous reports. Kowalski activated her recorder and began documenting ambient sound levels. According to her field notes, she spoke continuously into the recorder, describing her observations in real time. 17 minutes later, they exited the area. When Kowalski reviewed the recording that evening, she found something she could not explain. The 18-minute file contained no intelligible audio. The entire recording consisted of uniform static, not the chaotic noise of electronic interference, but a steady, unvarying hiss. Her spoken narration was absent. The sound of footsteps, wind, and the rustling of equipment was absent. Only the static remained. Kowalski returned the following day with additional equipment, including a backup recorder and a portable oscilloscope. She repeated the experiment. The result was identical. Both recorders captured only static. The oscilloscope detected no abnormal electromagnetic interference. In her final report, submitted to the National Park Service in April 1998, Kowalski wrote, "The phenomenon cannot be attributed to equipment malfunction, as multiple devices from different manufacturers produced identical results. The affected area appears to suppress or absorb acoustic energy in a manner inconsistent with known physical principles. I recommend further study by specialists in atmospheric physics and geoacoustics." The National Park Service acknowledged receipt of the report. No further study was authorized. Michael Benally, who had guided Kowalski during her research, later spoke off the record to a journalist from the Navajo Times. He described the silence as unnatural and deliberate. He noted that traditional stories among Navajo elders reference a place in the canyon where sound does not travel, known in Diné Bizad as a location where the air does not carry words. Elders warn against speaking names in this place, believing that words spoken there are heard elsewhere by something or someone who listens. When the journalist asked for clarification, Benally declined to elaborate. He said only, "Some things are not meant to be heard. That's why they take the sound away." In 2003, the National Park Service quietly updated trail maps and visitor information for Canyon de Chelly. The White House Trail was not closed, but new advisory signs were installed at the trailhead. The signs warned visitors of unpredictable acoustic anomalies and recommended remaining on marked paths at all times. No explanation was provided for the nature or cause of these anomalies. Between 2005 2015, at least 24 additional reports were filed by visitors and guides describing similar experiences. The reports are consistent in their details. Sudden cessation of sound, duration of 1 to 3 minutes, precise geographic boundaries. Several reports note an additional detail not mentioned in earlier accounts. Witnesses describe a sensation of pressure in the ears, similar to rapid changes in altitude, despite no change in elevation. In 2011, a team of graduate students from Northern Arizona University attempted to map the boundaries of the silent zone using handheld GPS units and acoustic sensors. The team included 4 researchers: Thomas Orland, Jessica Tran, Robert Keefe, and Amanda Reyes. They entered the canyon with permission from Navajo Nation authorities and established a grid pattern to systematically document the affected area. The team spent 6 hours in the canyon. They collected data at 30 separate locations. When they returned to their vehicle and reviewed the GPS logs, they discovered an inconsistency. All 4 GPS units showed significant drift within a specific cluster of coordinates. The drift was not random. Each unit recorded positions that deviated from actual location by approximately 300 yards in the same direction, northwest, toward an unmarked section of the canyon wall. Thomas Orland described the finding in his thesis, Abstract. GPS accuracy degradation within the anomalous zone suggests localized disruption of satellite signal integrity. The cause remains undetermined, but the spatial correlation between acoustic suppression and navigational errors implies a shared mechanism. His thesis was submitted in 2012. It was not accepted for publication. His faculty advisor later stated that the research lacked sufficient empirical rigor and recommended Orland pursue a different topic for his graduate work. In 2016, a Freedom of Information Act request filed by an independent researcher sought access to all National Park Service documents related to the Silence Zone. The request was partially granted. 17 pages of incident reports were released, heavily redacted. The oldest document in the release was dated 1952, 44 years before the first official report in 1996. The 1952 document, authored by a park ranger named Daniel Whitmore, describes an incident involving a group of Navajo workers who had been contracted to perform trail maintenance. The workers reported entering an area where All sound ceased and the air felt heavy. Whitmore's report notes that the workers refused to continue and requested reassignment. His recommendation was brief. Mark area as restricted. Inform tribal authorities. Do not assign further maintenance. The document includes a handwritten note in the margin, author unknown, listening place, do not speak names. Canyon de Chelly remains open to visitors. The White House Trail is accessible year-round. Park rangers continue to guide tours into the canyon floor, though they rarely venture into the northwestern section where most incidents have been reported. When asked about the silent zone, rangers typically offer vague explanations involving canyon acoustics or temperature inversions. They do not elaborate. Navajo guides who work in the canyon generally decline to discuss the phenomenon with outsiders. A few have spoken anonymously, repeating the same warnings. Do not speak loudly in certain areas. Do not call out names. And if the silence comes, do not try to fill it. One guide who requested complete anonymity offered a single additional detail during an interview in 2019. He said that his grandfather had warned him about the listening place when he was a child. The warning included specific instructions. If you enter the silence, count your breaths. If you count more than 10, leave immediately. When asked why, the guide said, because if you stay longer, something else starts counting. Some marks on stone should not be watched too closely. Sycamore Canyon cuts through the Coconino National Forest southwest of Flagstaff, Arizona. The canyon stretches 21 miles and reaches depths of 700 feet in certain sections. Unlike the more famous Oak Creek Canyon to the east, Sycamore remains largely undeveloped. There are no paved roads along its rim, no visitor centers, and no established campgrounds. The U.S. Forest Service maintains minimal presence. Hikers who enter do so at their own risk, and cell phone coverage is non-existent throughout most of the canyon system. The Sinagua people inhabited this region between 600 and 1400 A.D. They left behind cliff dwellings, pottery fragments, and extensive rock art. Petroglyphs appear on canyon walls throughout the Southwest, but Sycamore Canyon contains an unusually high concentration of these markings. Most depict geometric patterns, spirals, handprints, and stylized human figures. Archaeologists have documented hundreds of individual panels. One panel, however, has never been formally documented. In May 1973, archaeologist Dr. Margaret Bishop from Arizona State University led a team into a remote section of Sycamore Canyon to catalog previously unrecorded rock art. The team included graduate students Ronald Kimball and Susan Vega, along with photographer James Holloway. They hiked 8 miles from the nearest access point, following a narrow game trail along the canyon's western rim. On the third day of their survey, they discovered a shallow alcove approximately 40 feet above the canyon floor, accessible only by technical climbing. The alcove measured roughly 12 feet wide and 8 feet deep. The back wall contained petroglyphs unlike any Bishop had seen in her 22 years of fieldwork. The images were extraordinarily detailed. Elaborate spiral patterns interlocked with geometric shapes and what appeared to be astronomical symbols. The complexity suggested advanced planning and significant time investment. Bishop estimated the panel contained over 200 individual elements, all carved with remarkable precision. Holloway photographed the panel extensively, using both color and black and white film. He took close-up shots of individual symbols and wide-angle images showing the entire composition. The photographs were clear and well lit. Bishop's field notes described the panel as possibly late Sinagua period, but stylistically anomalous. Degree of detail inconsistent with known examples from this region. The team spent 6 hours documenting the site before descending. Bishop planned to return the following summer with specialized equipment for more detailed analysis. She never published her findings. In 1981, Dr. Bishop returned to the alcove with a smaller team. This time, she brought only Ronald Kimball, who had completed his doctoral work and now taught at Northern Arizona University. They carried updated camera equipment and portable lighting. The hike took 2 days. When they reached the alcove and climbed to the rock face, Bishop stopped. The petroglyphs had changed. According to Kimball's personal journal, recovered after his death in 2017, the spiral patterns were less complex. Several of the astronomical symbols were absent entirely. The overall composition appeared simpler, cruder. Bishop spent 40 minutes comparing the wall to Holloway's photographs from 1973. The photographs showed elaborate interlocking spirals. The wall showed basic circular shapes with minimal internal detail. Kimball wrote, "Margaret refused to photograph it. She said we needed to leave immediately. When I asked why, she told me the site was actively degrading and our presence might accelerate the process. I didn't understand what she meant. The petroglyphs weren't eroding, they were changing." Bishop and Kimball descended without taking new photographs. Bishop submitted a brief report to the Forest Service recommending the site be designated as archaeologically sensitive and closed to public access. The Forest Service complied. In 1982, the alcove's coordinates were removed from official survey maps, and the access trail was allowed to overgrow. Dr. Bishop died in 1994. Her personal research files were donated to Arizona State University's Anthropology Department. The files related to the Sycamore Canyon panel were missing. In 2003, a rock climbing guide named Derek Lansing accidentally rediscovered the alcove while exploring unmapped routes in the canyon. Lansing photographed the petroglyphs and posted the images to an online climbing forum, seeking information about their origin and significance. The photographs showed a wall covered in simple, almost primitive markings. A few basic spirals, several handprints, and crude anthropomorphic figures. The complexity documented by Bishop in 1973 was absent. Ronald Kimball saw the photographs. He contacted Lansing directly and requested the exact GPS coordinates. Lansing provided them. Kimball compared the new images to Holloway's originals from 1973. The wall was the same. The location was identical. But the petroglyphs had simplified. Kimball published a paper in 2004 titled "Temporal Anomalies in Sinagua Rock Art, a Case Study." The paper described the Sycamore Canyon panel and presented photographic evidence spanning 31 years. Kimball proposed no explanation for the changes. He simply documented the progression: complex in 1973, less complex in 1981, primitive in 2003. The paper was rejected by every major archaeology journal. Reviewers cited methodological concerns and insufficient evidence. One reviewer wrote, "The author appears to suggest petroglyphs are capable of temporal reversal. This is not, oh boy, credible hypothesis." Kimball withdrew the paper. He did not attempt publication again. In 2007, amateur historian Sylvia Marquez obtained copies of Kimball's research through a Freedom of Information Act request filed with the Forest Service. Marquez had been investigating historical land use in Coconino National Forest and stumbled across references to the restricted alcove. She contacted Kimball, who agreed to share his findings off the record. Marquez interviewed Kimball in February 2008. During the interview, Kimball described his final visit to the site in 2006. He had hiked alone, without permission, carrying a digital camera and Bishop's original field notes. When he reached the alcove, he found the wall nearly blank. A few faint scratches remained, along with 2 or 3 barely visible handprints. The elaborate spirals and geometric patterns were gone. The site looked as if it had been lightly marked and then abandoned, perhaps centuries ago. Kimball photographed the wall. When he reviewed the images later, he noticed something else. In the lower right corner of one photograph, barely visible in shadow, was a single petroglyph he had not seen during his visit. The image showed a spiral, freshly carved, the edges still sharp. He returned 2 weeks later. The spiral was gone. Kimball's interview with Marquez was never published. Marquez's notes indicate that Kimball requested anonymity and expressed concern about professional repercussions. He told her, "I don't know if the wall is eroding backward or if we're documenting something that hasn't happened yet. Either way, the site is becoming less complex over time. It's moving toward nothing." Marquez attempted to verify Kimball's account by visiting the alcove herself in 2009. She documented her attempt in a personal blog post, later deleted. According to cached versions of the post, Marquez successfully located the alcove, but found the climbing access point collapsed. A recent rockfall had made the wall inaccessible without specialized equipment. She photographed the site from a distance using a telephoto lens. The wall appeared blank. In 2012, the Forest Service updated land management policies for Sycamore Canyon. The update included new restrictions on climbing and off-trail hiking in designated ecologically sensitive zones. The coordinates of these zones were not published. Local climbing groups noted that several previously accessible areas, including a section of the western rim, were now off-limits without explanation. Derek Lansing, the climber who had rediscovered the alcove in 2003, attempted to return in 2014. He found the access trail completely overgrown and impassable. He reported his findings to the Forest Service and requested information about the site's current status. The Forest Service responded that the area had been reclassified and was no longer open to recreational use. No further details were provided. Ronald Kimball died in 2017 at age 68. His personal effects included multiple binders of photographs, field notes, and correspondence related to the Sycamore Canyon panel. His family donated the materials to Northern Arizona University. The university's Special Collections Department accepted the donation but classified the materials as restricted access pending administrative review. As of 2023, the materials remain restricted. James Holloway, the photographer who documented the panel in 1973, was contacted by a researcher in 2019. Holloway confirmed the authenticity of his original photographs and provided high-resolution scans from the original negatives. He described the petroglyphs as the most intricate rock art I'd ever seen. When asked if he had returned to the site, Holloway said, "Margaret told me not to. She said some things are better left alone. I should have asked what she meant." The alcove in Sycamore Canyon is no longer accessible. The Forest Service maintains that the closure is due to geological instability and erosion risk. No timetable for reopening has been announced, but every few years a hiker posts a photograph online. The images are always taken from a distance, always slightly out of focus. They show a blank rock wall in a shallow alcove high above a canyon floor. And sometimes, if you look closely at the shadows, you can see the faint outline of something that might have been there once, or something that hasn't been carved yet. There is a place in Arizona where winter never arrives. Marble Canyon lies in the northern reaches of Arizona, where the Colorado River carves through layers of Kaibab limestone and Coconino sandstone. The canyon stretches 61 miles from Lee's Ferry to the confluence with the Little Colorado River, marking the beginning of Grand Canyon proper. The terrain is severe. Summer temperatures exceed 110 degrees. Winter storms bring snow and ice. The elevation ranges from 3,000 to 7,000 feet. The Navajo Nation borders the eastern rim. Most of the land remains undeveloped. The U.S. Geological Survey maintains seismic monitoring stations throughout the region, tracking fault lines and volcanic activity. The area is geologically stable. There are no active hot springs, no volcanic vents, no documented geothermal anomalies. The last significant volcanic event occurred approximately 1,000 years ago, 40 miles to the west. In November 1994, USGS geologist Franklin Russo was conducting routine soil temperature surveys near Marble Canyon when his instruments recorded an inconsistency. A localized area measuring approximately 150 feet by 120 feet registered a surface temperature of 126 degrees Fahrenheit. The ambient air temperature was 43 degrees. It was late afternoon, overcast with intermittent snow. Russo recalibrated his equipment and took additional readings. The results were consistent. He marked the location with GPS coordinates and returned to his field station to file a report. 3 days later, he returned with a colleague, geophysicist Dr. Laura Mendez from Northern Arizona University. They brought infrared cameras, ground thermometers, and portable seismic sensors. The temperature readings were identical to Russo's initial measurements. The heat was concentrated entirely at ground level. The air above the site remained cool. When Mendez placed her hand 6 inches above the surface, she felt no warmth. When she touched the ground, the heat was immediate and intense. They documented the site for 4 hours. The temperature never fluctuated. As the sun set and ambient temperatures dropped to 31 degrees, the ground remained at 126 degrees. Snow fell briefly. Flakes landing on the heated section melted instantly. Flakes landing 3 feet away accumulated normally. Russo's report, filed on November 18, 1994, described the phenomenon as geothermally inconsistent and recommended further investigation. The report included thermal imaging photographs showing a clearly defined rectangular area glowing white against the cool blue background of surrounding terrain. The USGS authorized a follow-up survey in January 1995. The team included Russo, Mendez, and structural geologist Dr. Raymond Okoro. They brought ground-penetrating radar capable of imaging subsurface structures to a depth of 200 feet. The radar results were unexpected. 20 feet below the heated surface, the equipment detected a void. The void was geometrically perfect. A rectangular chamber measuring approximately 30 feet by 20 feet by 8 feet. The walls appeared smooth and uniform. No natural geological process creates structures with such precise dimensions. Below the chamber, the radar detected a vertical shaft. The shaft was narrow, roughly 3 feet in diameter, and descended straight down. At 200 feet, the maximum depth of their equipment, the shaft continued. Okoro requisitioned deeper penetrating equipment and returned in March 1995 with a unit capable of imaging to 600 feet. The shaft extended at least 400 feet. Beyond that depth, the signal degraded and could not provide reliable data. The shaft's walls were uniform throughout its length. No branching tunnels, no irregularities, just a straight vertical column descending into the earth. Okoro's report noted, "The structure does not correspond to any known natural formation. Possibility of abandoned mining operation considered but dismissed due to lack of historical records and absence of tool marks or drilling evidence on chamber walls." He recommended drilling to access the chamber and determine the source of the heat. The recommendation was denied. In April 1995, the site was visited by a team whose affiliation was not disclosed in subsequent reports. Franklin Russo was informed by his USGS supervisor that external specialists would be conducting their own assessment and that his team's access to the site was temporarily suspended. Russo was not provided with details about the visiting team's credentials or institutional backing. The restriction lasted 6 weeks. When Russo was permitted to return in June, he found the site unchanged. The temperature remained constant at 128 degrees. He requested access to the reports filed by the external team. His request was denied on the grounds that the reports were administratively sensitive. Laura Mendez attempted to publish findings in the Journal of Geophysical Research in September 1995. Her paper, titled Anomalous Thermal Retention in Non-Geothermal Environments, a Case Study from Northern Arizona, was rejected without peer review. The editor's response cited insufficient evidence of reproducible phenomena and suggested the measurements were likely the result of equipment malfunction. Mendez resubmitted to 3 additional journals. All 3 rejected the paper. In October 1995, Raymond Okoro received notification that his research grant had been terminated early due to budgetary reallocation. He was reassigned to a coastal erosion project in California. When he protested, his department head told him the decision was not negotiable. Franklin Russo continued to monitor the site independently through 1996. He documented consistent temperature readings across all seasons. In January 1996, during a severe winter storm, he recorded ground temperatures of 129 degrees, while ambient air temperature was 14 degrees, and snow accumulated to a depth of 7 inches, everywhere except the heated zone. In his personal notes, Russo wrote, "The heat is not radiating from below. It is present at the surface only. Measurements taken at depths of 1 foot, 3 feet, and 6 feet show normal geothermal gradients. Whatever is generating this heat is doing so at the exact boundary between air and earth." In March 1997, Russo was informed that his position with the USGS was being eliminated as part of organizational restructuring. He was offered a position in the administrative division in Denver. He declined and left the agency. Laura Mendez remained at Northern Arizona University, but shifted her research focus to conventional geothermal systems. When asked about the Marble Canyon site during a faculty interview in 2001, she said only, "There are some research avenues that don't lead anywhere productive." Raymond Okoro died in 2009. His archived research materials, donated to the University of Arizona, included extensive files on the Marble Canyon anomaly. The files contain radar imagery, thermal photographs, and hand-drawn diagrams of the subsurface structures. A note paperclip to the front of the folder reads, "Tried to get funding 3 times, denied each time, no explanation given. Someone doesn't want this studied." The site remains accessible to the public. It lies on Bureau of Land Management land with no restrictions on entry. Hikers occasionally report finding an area of warm ground, though most assume it is ordinary sun-heated rock. Few linger long enough to notice that the heat persists after sunset, through the night, and into the coldest hours before dawn. In 2015, a wilderness survival instructor named Craig Alvarez led a winter camping group through the region. On the night of December 22nd, temperatures dropped to 8 degrees. Alvarez woke at 3 a.m. and noticed one member of his group, a participant named Julia Simmons, sleeping outside her tent directly on the ground. He approached to check on her and found her sleeping bag unzipped, her face flushed, her clothing damp with sweat. The ground beneath her was hot to the touch. Alvarez moved Simmons to a cooler area and woke her. She was disoriented and mildly dehydrated, but otherwise unharmed. When Alvarez returned to the spot where she had been sleeping, he measured the ground temperature with a cooking thermometer. It read 124 degrees. He filed a report with the BLM, noting the exact GPS coordinates and expressing concern about potential danger to winter campers. The BLM responded with a form letter thanking him for his input and assuring him that appropriate personnel would review the matter. No warning signs were posted. No information was added to trail maps. In 2018, a team of amateur geologists attempted to locate the site using Russo's original GPS coordinates, which had been leaked on an online forum. They brought thermal imaging equipment and ground temperature probes. They spent 2 days searching, but could not find any area exhibiting unusual heat. One team member suggested the coordinates might have been incorrect. Another proposed the phenomenon was seasonal. They abandoned the search and posted their findings online, concluding that the story was likely exaggerated or fabricated. 6 months later, a hiker named Marcus Delorme posted a photograph to a geology enthusiast group. The image showed a patch of bare ground surrounded by snow. The caption read, "Weird warm spot near Marble Canyon. Snow won't stick here. Checked with a thermometer. Over 120 degrees. Anyone know what causes this?" The post received 43 comments. Most suggested underground hot springs or decomposing organic matter. 2 users noted that the location matched descriptions from older reports about a geothermal anomaly. One user, posting under an anonymous account, wrote, "Don't camp there and don't dig, trust me." The account was deleted the following day. The heated ground remains. It has been documented intermittently for 29 years. No comprehensive study has ever been published. No official explanation has been offered. The site appears on no maps. It carries no warnings. But in the winter, when snow covers the canyon rim, there is always one spot where the ground stays bare. And if you place your hand there, you can feel something beneath the earth. Not warmth. Not exactly. Something that feels like warmth, but doesn't move the way heat should. Something that waits. Some sounds should not arrive before they are made. Oak Creek Canyon cuts through the Colorado Plateau between Flagstone and Sedona, Arizona. The canyon descends 2,000 feet over 16 miles, carved by Oak Creek through layers of Kaibab limestone, Toro Weep sandstone, and Coconino formations. State Route 89. A follows the creek bed, winding through narrow passages where the canyon walls rise vertically on both sides. The area attracts rock climbers year-round. The routes range from beginner-friendly to technical multi-pitch ascents requiring advanced skills. The canyon has a reputation for unusual acoustics. Sound behaves strangely in certain sections. Voices carry across distances they shouldn't. Echoes persist longer than physics would predict. Climbers often report hearing conversations from groups hundreds of yards away with startling clarity. Most dismiss these experiences as natural canyon effects, sound waves bouncing off limestone walls in unexpected patterns. But some sounds don't bounce. They anticipate. On March 7, 2009, climber Rebecca Nolan was attempting a route called the Sterling Pass Wall, a 5-pitch climb on the canyon's eastern face. Nolan had been climbing for 12 years and was experienced with multi-pitch technical routes. She began her ascent at 4:20 a.m., hoping to complete the climb before the afternoon heat made the rock surface too hot to touch safely. At approximately 5:15 a.m., Nolan reached the third belay station, a narrow ledge 180 feet above the canyon floor. She clipped into her anchor and called down to her climbing partner, Marcus Webb, who was belaying from below. Standard climbing protocol. She shouted, "Off belay! Anchor secure!" Her voice echoed across the canyon. Then the echo responded, "Rope stuck. Can't pull." Nolan had not said those words. She had not yet attempted to pull the rope. But 3 seconds after hearing the echo, she did try to pull the rope. It was stuck. Nolan descended the route immediately. She and Webb packed their equipment and returned to their vehicle without completing the climb. Nolan's climbing journal, which she maintained meticulously, contains an entry from that day. Echo spoke words I was about to say, exact words, before I said them, left immediately. Won't climb that wall again. She did not file a formal report. She told 2 friends about the incident. Both suggested she had misheard her own voice or experienced a delayed auditory processing issue caused by altitude and early morning fatigue. Nolan might have accepted that explanation if she had been the only one. In June 2011, climber Aaron Vasquez was ascending the same route with his partner, Jennifer Park. They reached the third belay station at 5:32 a.m. Vasquez called across the canyon to test the echo, a common practice among climbers to gauge sound travel time and acoustic conditions. He shouted, "Testing, echo." The echo returned, "Don't look up." Vasquez had not said those words. He looked up instinctively. A basketball-sized rock was falling directly toward him, dislodged from somewhere above. He pressed himself against the wall. The rock missed him by less than 2 feet. Vasquez and Park completed the climb. When they reached the top, Vasquez examined the area where the rock had originated. He found no evidence of other climbers above them. No fresh scuff marks, no rope grooves, no chalk residue. The rock had fallen from an area with no established roots. In his incident report, filed with the Coconino National Forest Climbing Registry, Vasquez wrote, "Heard warning before danger occurred. Source of warning unknown. No other climbers present. Possible auditory hallucination, but timing was precise." The report was filed and archived. No investigation followed. Between 2011 and 2016, at least 7 climbers reported similar experiences on routes along Oak Creek Canyon's eastern wall. The reports shared common elements: early morning ascents between 4 and 6 a.m., voices returning from across the canyon, responses containing information the speaker had not yet vocalized. In 4 cases, the responses accurately predicted events that occurred seconds later. In 3 cases, the responses contained words the climbers insisted they had never spoken aloud. Dr. Patricia Gorski, an acoustic physicist from the University of Arizona, learned about the reports in 2017 through a colleague who climbed recreationally. Gorski specialized in environmental acoustics and had published research on sound propagation in canyon systems. She contacted Aaron Vasquez and requested permission to review his incident report. Vasquez agreed and provided additional details he had not included in the official report. Gorski organized a field study in August 2017. She recruited 4 volunteer climbers and equipped each with body-mounted audio recorders capable of capturing sound at high fidelity with precise timestamps. The team ascended Sterling Pass Wall in pairs on 3 separate mornings, all between 4 and 6 a.m. On the second morning, climber Diana Okonkwo reached the third belay station at 5:08 a.m. She called to her partner below. Ready to climb. Her audio recorder captured the echo returning from across the canyon. The echo said, "Cam placement weak. Check again." Okonkwo had not mentioned cam placement. She had not yet assessed her anchor, but after hearing the echo, she examined her cam, a spring-loaded device wedged into a rock crack to secure her rope. The cam was seated improperly. If she had weighted it, it would have failed. She reset the cam and continued the climb. Gorski reviewed the audio recording. The timestamp confirmed the echo occurred 1.3 seconds after Okonkwo's initial call. The voice was Okonkwo's. The pitch, tone, and speech patterns matched. But the words were different. Gorski conducted spectrographic analysis. The echo's frequency distribution was consistent with natural acoustic reflection. There was no evidence of electronic manipulation or external audio sources. The sound had originated from across the canyon, reflected off the western wall, and returned to Okonkwo's position exactly as physics would predict, except for the content. In her preliminary report, Gorski wrote, "The acoustic properties of Oak Creek Canyon facilitate exceptional sound reflection, particularly during early morning hours when temperature inversions create stable atmospheric layers. However, no known acoustic phenomenon can account for semantic alteration of reflected sound. The recorded echo contains linguistically meaningful content that was not present in the original vocalization. She submitted the report to the Journal of the Acoustical Society of America in November 2017. The paper was rejected. Reviewers noted extraordinary claims requiring extraordinary evidence and suggested the recordings might have captured radio interference or inadvertent vocalization by the climber. Gorski attempted replication studies in 2018 and 2019. She recorded over 40 hours of audio across multiple climbing sessions. Most echoes behaved normally. 6 recordings contained anomalies, responses that did not match the original vocalizations. In each case, the anomalous echo occurred between 4:55 and 5:45 a.m. at elevations between 150 and 200 feet on the eastern wall. Gorski could not explain the pattern. She could only document it. In 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic suspended field research. Gorski did not return to Oak Creek Canyon. In 2021, she accepted a position at a private acoustic engineering firm and ceased publishing academic research. When contacted by a journalist in 2022, Gorski declined to comment on her Oak Creek Canyon study. She said only, "Some phenomena resist conventional analysis. That doesn't make them any less real." Diana Okonkwo continued climbing in Oak Creek Canyon through 2023. She avoids the Sterling Pass wall. When asked why, she tells people the route doesn't interest her anymore. She does not mention the echo. But in a post on a private climbing forum in March 2023, someone using Okonkwo's username wrote, "Has anyone else heard themselves talking before they talk? Specifically on the east wall early morning. I know how that sounds, but I need to know if I'm the only one." The post received 19 responses. 14 dismissed the question as a joke. 3 asked for clarification. 2 replied, "Yes, don't go back there." The thread was deleted within 24 hours. No explanation was provided. Oak Creek Canyon remains one of Arizona's most popular climbing destinations. The Sterling Pass wall sees regular traffic. Guidebooks describe the route as classic and highly recommended. No warnings are posted. No restrictions are in place. Climbers still ascend before dawn, seeking cooler temperatures and solitude. And sometimes, in the thin air between 4 and 6 a.m., they hear their own voices calling back to them, saying things they haven't said yet, saying things they were about to say, saying things they never intended to say at all. And when they stop to listen, really listen, they can hear the echo waiting. Not for a sound to reflect, but for a sound to happen, as if the canyon knows what comes next, as if it's been listening all along. Some places disappear too quickly to be explained. The Little Colorado River Gorge cuts through the Painted Desert in northeastern Arizona, a remote stretch of Navajo Nation land where the river carved canyons up to 2,000 feet deep. The area is harsh and isolated. Summer temperatures exceed 105 degrees. Water is scarce except during flash flood season, typically July through September. Few roads penetrate the region. The nearest permanent settlement is Cameron, Arizona, 23 miles west. In the 1890s, copper deposits were discovered along the gorge's southern rim. Small mining operations sprouted and died within years, most abandoned when ore quality proved insufficient for profitable extraction. By 1900, only 2 camps remained active. By 1920, only 1, Gillespie. Gillespie was never more than a few dozen people, miners, their families, a general store, a boarding house. The camp survived because the copper vein, while modest, was consistent. The mine employed between 12 and 18 men at any given time. Families came and went. Children attended a one-room school during winter months. By 1950, Gillespie had become a permanent settlement in the way desert outposts sometimes do, barely alive, but alive nonetheless. The last census record mentioning Gillespie was 1960. Population, 41. On August 9, 1962, a reported flash flood destroyed the camp. The official account comes from a single source, a Bureau of Indian Affairs report filed by Field Agent Walter Drummond on August 12, 1962. Drummond had been conducting routine welfare checks in remote Navajo communities. His report states that he arrived at Gillespie's location on August 11th and found the site completely inundated by flood debris and sediment. No structures remain visible. No survivors located. Presumed total loss of life and property due to flash flooding event estimated to have occurred evening of August 9th. Drummond's report recommended no recovery effort due to the depth of sediment and the likelihood that remains would never be found. The Bureau of Indian Affairs accepted the recommendation. No search was conducted. No bodies were recovered. No memorial was erected. Gillespie disappeared from maps after 1963. In 1987, geologist Dr. Henry Calabrese from the University of New Mexico was conducting erosion studies along the Little Colorado River Gorge. He reviewed historical hydrological data for the region, including rainfall and flood records. His research required understanding seasonal water flow patterns to predict future erosion risks. He found no evidence of significant flooding in August 1962. Rainfall records from Cameron, the nearest weather station, showed below-average precipitation that summer. The Little Colorado River's flow rate in August 1962 was documented as low to moderate. No flash flood warnings had been issued. No other communities reported flood damage. The conditions necessary for a catastrophic flash flood, sustained heavy rainfall upstream, rapid runoff concentration, narrow canyon funneling, were absent. Calabrese noted the discrepancy in his research, but did not pursue it. He was studying erosion, not historical mysteries. His 1989 paper on gorge formation mentioned Gillespie in a footnote. The mining camp of Gillespie, reportedly destroyed by flooding in 1962, may warrant further investigation as flood documentation appears inconsistent with hydrological records. No one investigated further until 2004. That year, a team of archaeologists from Northern Arizona University received permission from the Navajo Nation to survey historical mining sites along the gorge. The team included Dr. Samuel Okafor, Dr. Lisa Kowalczyk, and graduate student Brian Ferraro. Their goal was to document abandoned industrial sites before erosion destroyed all evidence of early mining activity. They located Gillespie using coordinates from 1950-era topographic maps. What they found should not have been possible. The site was buried beneath approximately 40 feet of sediment. Ground-penetrating radar revealed structures beneath the surface, building foundations, equipment, and what appeared to be intact rooms with furniture and personal belongings still in place. The preservation was extraordinary. Flash floods destroy and scatter. They do not bury things carefully. Okafor's team obtained permission to excavate a small test area. Over 3 weeks, they carefully removed sediment from a 20-foot square section. At 38 feet depth, they reached the original ground surface. They found a structure's corner, stone foundation, wooden wall remnants, and inside, a table with plates still arranged on its surface. The plates were intact. A rusted fork lay beside one plate. A chair stood upright, pushed back slightly as if someone had just risen from a meal. There were no human remains. The team expanded their excavation. They uncovered portions of 3 additional structures. Every building showed the same pattern: perfect preservation of objects, tools, personal effects, furniture arranged as if occupants had simply walked away moments before burial. Clothing hung on wall pegs. Boots stood near doorways. A child's toy, a carved wooden horse, sat on a windowsill. No remains, no evidence of panic or evacuation, no scattered belongings suggesting hasty departure. Dr. Kowalczyk examined the sediment layers. The deposit was uniform, lacking the stratification typical of flood events. Flood sediment shows layers: coarse material at the bottom, fine silt at the top, organic debris mixed throughout. The sediment covering Gillespie was homogeneous: fine-grained sand and silt with no stratification, no organic material, no variation in composition from top to bottom. In her field report, Kowalczyk wrote, "The deposit appears to have been emplaced instantaneously as a single event. No known natural process produces this type of uniform, unstratified sediment layer at this thickness." Brian Ferraro conducted radiometric dating on wood samples from the buried structures. The wood dated to the early 1900s, consistent with Gillespie's known history. He also dated organic material from the sediment itself. The sediment dated to approximately 5,000 years before present. The sediment was older than the town it buried. Okafor's team documented their findings and prepared a research paper. The paper was submitted to American Antiquity in 2005. It was rejected. Reviewers noted methodological concerns and questioned the dating results, suggesting contamination or sampling errors. The team revised and resubmitted to 2 additional journals. Both rejected the paper. In 2006, Okafor presented preliminary findings at a regional archaeology conference. The presentation was poorly attended. One colleague later told Okafor privately, "You're suggesting something that sounds impossible, and without a compelling explanation, no one will touch it." Okafor tried to return to the site in 2007 for additional excavation. His permit application was denied by the Navajo Nation Heritage and Historic Preservation Department. No reason was provided. He reapplied annually through 2011. Each application was denied. In 2012, a journalist named Patricia Reeves from a Flagstaff alternative newspaper contacted Okafor after reading about his conference presentation in archived proceedings. Okafor shared his research materials, including photographs of the excavation, radar imagery, and dating results. Reeves attempted to visit the site. She obtained GPS coordinates from Okafor and hired a Navajo guide, Thomas Nez, to lead her to the location. When they arrived, they found the area surrounded by newly installed fencing. Signs indicated the site was restricted due to cultural sensitivity and ongoing preservation efforts. No contact information was provided for permit requests. Nez told Reeves that elders in nearby communities had always avoided the area where Gillespie once stood. The place was considered spiritually problematic. He said his grandfather had warned him never to camp near the place where the ground came up instead of the water going down. When Reeves asked what that meant, Nez said, "My grandfather said the earth swallowed that town in one breath, not water, earth. He said the people were gone before the ground covered them. He said they were taken first, and then the earth closed over them so no one would ask questions." Reeves published a feature article in August 2012 titled, "The Town That Vanished Beneath Arizona: What Really Happened to Gillespie." The article summarized Okafor's findings and included interviews with Nez and 2 Navajo elders who spoke anonymously. Both elders confirmed that stories about Gillespie's disappearance predated the official 1962 flood account. One elder said, "That place was wrong before it disappeared. People felt it. They left when they could." The article received limited attention. A few regional history blogs discussed it. No mainstream media followed up. Samuel Okafor retired from Northern Arizona University in 2018. His research files on Gillespie were donated to the university's Special Collections Department. The files remain accessible to researchers, though few have requested them. Lisa Kowalczyk died in 2020. Her personal papers included a journal entry from 2006, written shortly after their final excavation. We found 41 place settings in total, 41 plates, 41 forks, 41 chairs. That was the census count. Everyone was sitting down to eat. And then they weren't there anymore. Just their things, waiting under 40 feet of earth that shouldn't have been there. I don't know if they were buried or hidden, but I know this. The earth covered them gently, like it wanted to preserve something, or keep something quiet. The site remains restricted. No additional excavations have been conducted. Satellite imagery from 2023 shows the area as undisturbed desert, marked only by the rusted fence installed over a decade ago. But sometimes hikers report finding objects on the surface near the old Gillespie site. A rusted buckle, a piece of worked copper, a button, small things working their way up through 40 feet of earth. As if something below is trying to return them, or as if the earth is slowly letting go. Navigation should not remember places that no longer exist. Havasu Canyon lies deep within the western Grand Canyon, accessible only by helicopter, horseback, or an 8-mile hike from Hualapai Hilltop. The canyon is home to the Havasupai tribe, whose reservation spans 185,000 acres of some of the most remote terrain in Arizona. Havasu Creek flows through the canyon, creating waterfalls that draw thousands of visitors annually. The village of Supai, population approximately 200, is the only permanent settlement within the Grand Canyon and the most remote community in the continental United States. Mail arrives by mule. In 1964, the National Weather Service established a research station 3 miles downstream from Supai Village. The Supai Weather Station was part of a broader initiative to study microclimates in extreme topography. The station operated continuously for 14 years, staffed by rotating 2-person teams who lived on-site for 3-month assignments. The station collected temperature, humidity, barometric pressure, and precipitation data. The information contributed to regional climate models and flash flood prediction systems. On November 3, 1978, the station transmitted its final weather report. The transmission was routine. Temperature 62 degrees. Humidity 38%. Barometric pressure normal. Wind speed calm. 6 hours later, the next scheduled transmission did not occur. The National Weather Service attempted radio contact. No response. A helicopter was dispatched on November 5th. The pilot found the station intact but abandoned. Both staff members were gone. Their personal belongings remained. Food was still in the refrigerator. Beds were made. The station's logbook sat open on the desk. The final entry, dated November 3, 1978, was written by meteorologist Douglas Pemberton. It read, "All clocks stopped at 1400 hours. Chronometers, wristwatches, and station clock all ceased simultaneously. Reset multiple times. All stop again at same moment. Calendar discrepancies noted. Instruments show date as October 18th. Logbook shows November 3rd, requesting immediate evacuation and equipment inspection." Below that, in different handwriting, was a note from Pemberton's partner, technician Maria Salazar. "All calendars wrong. Don't know what day it is anymore." That was the last entry. Search teams found no trace of Pemberton or Salazar. Their helicopter evacuation request had never been transmitted. The radio equipment was functional. The station's power supply was intact. Weather instruments continued recording data automatically for 3 days after the final log entry before batteries depleted. The National Weather Service launched an investigation. Search and rescue operations continued for 2 weeks. Havasupai tribal members assisted, covering terrain the helicopters couldn't access. No evidence of the missing staff was ever found. No clothing, no footprints leading away from the station, no signs of struggle or distress beyond the logbook entries. The station was decommissioned in January 1979. Equipment was removed. The structure was left standing but sealed. By 1985, the building had collapsed due to lack of maintenance. By 1990, only the concrete foundation remained. 26 years later, the coordinates began misbehaving. In 2005, hikers started reporting GPS malfunctions in Havasu Canyon. The complaints were sporadic at first. A device would place someone 300 yards from their actual location. Coordinates would drift during stationary readings. Multiple units would disagree about the same position. Park rangers documented the reports but attributed them to canyon interference. GPS signals require clear lines of sight to satellites. Deep canyons create signal bounce and multipath errors. The issue seemed unremarkable, but in 2008, a pattern emerged. Wilderness guide Jacob Winterhawk led commercial hiking trips into Havasu Canyon for 12 years. He carried multiple GPS units as standard safety protocol. In March 2008, during a routine descent, all three of his devices showed identical but incorrect coordinates. The units placed his group approximately 300 yards southeast of their actual position. Winterhawk knew the trail intimately. He recognized the error immediately. What troubled him was the consistency. All three devices, different brands and models, showed the exact same false location. He photographed the screens and continued the hike. When his group reached Supai Village, the GPS units corrected themselves. On the return hike 3 days later, the same error occurred in the same location. Again, all three units placed the group at identical false coordinates. Winterhawk filed a report with the National Park Service. In his report, he included the false coordinates his devices had displayed. A Park Service technician cross-referenced the coordinates with historical survey data. The false coordinates matched the exact location of the abandoned Supai weather station. The National Park Service forwarded Winterhawk's report to the U.S. Geological Survey, which manages GPS reference networks. USGS geodetic surveyor Elizabeth Cho reviewed the report and conducted follow-up interviews with Winterhawk. She found his account credible and troubling. Cho organized a field survey in June 2008. Her team established control points using differential GPS, which achieves centimeter-level accuracy by comparing readings from multiple receivers. They surveyed the area where Winterhawk had experienced malfunctions. Within a 2-mile radius of the former weather station, GPS accuracy degraded significantly. Devices consistently drifted toward the station's historical coordinates. The drift was not random. It was directional, persistent, and uniform across all consumer-grade GPS units tested. Differential GPS equipment, which corrects errors in real time using reference stations, performed normally. The phenomenon affected only standalone consumer devices. Cho's report, submitted in August 2008, concluded localized GPS anomaly of unknown origin. Error patterns suggest systematic bias rather than environmental interference. Recommend investigation of potential electromagnetic or ionospheric causes. No investigation followed. Between 2009 and 2015, at least 43 hikers reported similar GPS failures in the same area. Reports came from independent sources who had no knowledge of previous incidents. Each described the same behavior, coordinates drifting toward a fixed point approximately 300 yards from actual position. In 2012, amateur radio operator Vincent Almeida visited Havasu Canyon and brought spectrum analysis equipment. Almeida suspected electromagnetic interference might explain the GPS issues. He conducted radio frequency surveys throughout the canyon, measuring signal strength across multiple bands. He found no anomalous electromagnetic activity. Radio signals behaved normally. GPS satellite signals reached the canyon floor with expected strength. There was no interference, no unusual noise, nothing that would explain systematic position errors. But Almeida noticed something else. His digital watch stopped working while he stood near the weather station foundation. The watch used a quartz crystal oscillator powered by a battery. When he moved away from the foundation, the watch resumed normal operation. When he returned to the foundation, it stopped again. He tested the phenomenon repeatedly over 6 hours. The result was consistent. Within approximately 50 feet of the foundation, quartz timepieces malfunctioned. Mechanical watches continued functioning normally. Almeida's findings were published in a ham radio hobby magazine in 2013. The article generated mild interest but no scientific follow-up. In 2016, geophysicist Dr. Raymond Osei from the University of Arizona learned about the GPS anomaly through a former student who worked as a wilderness guide. Osei specialized in gravitational and magnetic field mapping. He suspected localized geological features might create gravitational anomalies affecting GPS signal processing. Osei obtained permits and conducted a gravimetric survey in October 2016. He used a portable gravimeter to measure subtle variations in Earth's gravitational field. Gravitational anomalies can indicate subsurface density variations, underground voids, ore deposits, or unusual rock formations. The survey detected a gravitational anomaly centered on the weather station foundation. The anomaly was small but measurable, a localized increase in gravitational acceleration equivalent to approximately 0.003% deviation from expected values. The increase suggested higher than normal density beneath the surface. Osei hypothesized a buried mass of dense material, perhaps iron ore, basalt intrusion, or meteoritic material. He applied for funding to conduct ground-penetrating radar surveys. The application was denied. His grant proposal was rejected by 3 separate funding agencies without detailed explanation. In 2018, Osei attempted to publish his gravimetric findings in the Journal of Geophysical Research. The paper was rejected. Reviewers noted that the gravitational anomaly, while measurable, was too small to explain GPS errors of the magnitude reported. Osei agreed. The gravitational deviation could not account for 300-yard position errors, but he had no alternative explanation. In his unpublished research notes, Osei wrote, "The GPS drift is not caused by the gravitational anomaly, but both phenomena are centered on the same location. This suggests a common cause we have not yet identified." In 2021, the Havasupai tribe updated trail signage in Havasu Canyon. New signs warned hikers that GPS devices may be unreliable and recommended using paper maps and established trail markers. The signs did not explain why GPS was unreliable. They simply advised caution. Tribal officials declined requests for interviews about the decision to post the warnings. In 2023, wilderness photographer Angela DeLuca visited Havasu Canyon and documented her experience on a travel blog. She described her GPS unit placing her at a location she had never visited. When she checked the coordinates against historical records, she discovered they matched the Supai weather station. DeLuca wrote, "I was standing on a trail I could see with my own eyes. But my GPS insisted I was somewhere else, somewhere that doesn't exist anymore. It felt like the device was remembering something that wasn't there." The Supai Weather Station Foundation remains visible to hikers who know where to look. The concrete pad is cracked and overgrown. No marker indicates what once stood there, but if you stand on that foundation and check your GPS, it will tell you that you are exactly where you should be. And every other location in the canyon will be wrong, as if that spot is the only fixed point, as if everything else is moving, or as if that place exists more firmly than anywhere around it. And one day, 45 years ago, 2 people stood there and wrote that all their clocks had stopped, and all their calendars were wrong. and no one ever explained what they meant. Some reflections show what should not be there. West Clear Creek Canyon cuts through the Mogollon Rim in central Arizona, a wilderness area spanning 15 miles of rugged terrain. The canyon reaches depths of 2,000 feet in sections, with sheer limestone walls rising vertically from the creek bed. West Clear Creek flows year-round, fed by springs and seasonal runoff. The area is remote and difficult to access. Most of the canyon requires technical canyoneering skills, rappelling, swimming through pools, and navigating boulder fields. The Forest Service maintains no trails through the canyon's interior. Hikers enter at their own risk. The Yavapai and Apache peoples historically used the canyon as a travel route and water source. Oral traditions describe certain places along the creek as spiritually significant, though specifics are rarely shared with outsiders. Early settlers avoided the canyon. Maps from the 1880s label portions of it as impassable or unexplored. Even today, large sections remain unmapped in detail. In May 1993, a group of experienced canyoneers entered West Clear Creek Canyon for a multi-day expedition. The group consisted of 6 people: trip leader Michael Sorensen, his wife Janet Sorensen, and 4 friends: Bradley Kimura, Susan Whitfield, Trevor Mbatha, and Lisa Kowalski. They planned to hike 12 miles through the canyon over 4 days, camping at designated wilderness sites. On their second day, approximately 6 miles into the canyon, they reached a spring-fed pool nestled in a narrow section of the gorge. The pool was roughly 30 feet across and appeared deep, with clear water fed by a spring emerging from the canyon wall. Sunlight reached the pool for only a few hours each day due to the steep walls. The group arrived around 2 p.m., when light fell directly on the water's surface. Michael Sorensen approached the pool to assess its depth and determine if they could swim across or needed to bypass it. As he leaned over the edge, he stopped. According to his trip report filed with the Coconino National Forest, he saw a face in the water that was not his own reflection. The face was that of a woman, middle-aged, wearing what appeared to be clothing from the early 1900s. She was looking up at him from beneath the surface. Sorensen stepped back and called to the others. When they approached, they all saw the same image, a woman's face, clearly visible, staring upward from the water. Janet Sorensen photographed the pool. The photograph shows clear water with rocks visible at the bottom. No face appears in the image, but all 6 witnesses insisted they saw the face with their own eyes while standing at the pool's edge. Bradley Kimura knelt at the water's edge and reached toward the surface. The moment his hand broke the plane of the water, the face disappeared. The pool showed only normal reflections: sky, canyon walls, and the faces of the group members looking down. They waited for 10 minutes. The face did not return. They continued their hike. The group completed their expedition without further incident. Michael Sorensen filed his trip report as a matter of routine documentation. He described the pool's location using GPS coordinates and noted the visual anomaly. He classified it as unexplained but non-threatening. The report was filed and archived. 3 years later, in August 1996, another canyoneering group reached the same pool. This group included wilderness photographer Daniel Okafor, who was documenting remote Arizona canyons for a conservation project. Okafor and his 3 companions arrived at the pool in late afternoon. Okafor set up his camera to photograph the spring and the surrounding canyon walls. Through his camera's viewfinder, he saw people standing in the water. Not reflections on the surface, but figures that appeared to be standing beneath the water, looking up. There were 4 of them: 2 men, 1 woman, and a child. They wore old-fashioned clothing. They were motionless, staring upward. Okafor lowered his camera and looked at the pool directly. The figures were still visible. He called to his companions. All 4 witnesses saw the same thing. 4 people standing in the water, unmoving, watching. Okafor took multiple photographs. When developed, the images showed only empty water and rocks. The figures did not appear on film. One of Okafor's companions, a geologist named Patricia Vega, suggested the figures might be some form of optical illusion caused by light refraction through the spring water. She collected a water sample for later analysis and made detailed notes about the pool's depth, clarity, and light conditions. Daniel Okafor reached toward the water with his hand. The moment he touched the surface, the figures vanished. The pool showed only normal reflections. The group waited for 20 minutes, but the figures did not return. Okafor contacted Michael Sorensen after his trip, having found Sorensen's reports in the Forest Service archives. The 2 men compared experiences. The location was identical. The phenomenon was similar, though Okafor had seen multiple figures rather than a single face. Both had witnessed the images disappear upon touching the water. Patricia Vega analyzed the water sample. The water was clean, spring-fed, with normal mineral content for limestone aquifer sources. Nothing unusual, nothing that would explain visual anomalies. In September 1996, Okafor returned to the pool with specialized camera equipment, including underwater cameras and polarizing filters. He brought 2 colleagues, photographer James Holloway and optical physicist Dr. Margaret Lind. They spent 8 hours at the site, photographing the pool from every angle under different lighting conditions. They saw the figures again. This time, 6 people appeared in the water, adults and children wearing clothing that appeared to span different times. Periods. Some wore what looked like early 1900s attire. Others wore clothing that might have been from the 1920s or 30s. All stood motionless beneath the surface, looking up. Dr. Lind examined the pool using polarizing filters, which eliminate surface glare and allow clearer views of underwater features. Through the filters, she could see the pool's bottom clearly. The figures remained visible, but they were not on the bottom. They appeared to be suspended in the water column, approximately 3 feet below the surface. Linde descended carefully into the pool to investigate. The water was cold, approximately 55 degrees. As she entered, the figures disappeared. She swam to the center of the pool and dove to the bottom. The pool was 12 feet deep. The bottom was covered with smooth stones and sand. There was nothing unusual. No underwater caverns, no unusual rock formations, nothing that might create optical illusions. When Linda exited the pool, the group waited. 45 minutes later, the figures had not returned. They continued waiting through sunset. The figures never reappeared that day. The team returned 48 hours later. The figures were visible again. Same location, same appearance, same motionless observation. Dr. Lindy documented the exact time, 2:14 p.m. She noted the light angle, weather conditions, and water clarity. She did not enter the water this time. James Holloway used a long pole to touch the water's surface from the shore. The figures vanished the moment the pole broke the surface tension. The team documented the time, 2:31 p.m. They waited to see how long the figures would remain absent. After 90 minutes, they left to make camp before dark. The following morning, they returned at dawn. No figures were visible. They returned at 2 p.m. The figures had returned. Dr. Linde noted the time, exactly 48 hours after the figures had disappeared the previous day. Over the next week, they established a pattern. The figures appeared in the pool continuously. Any disturbance of the water's surface caused them to vanish. Exactly 48 hours later, they returned. The cycle was precise and repeatable. Dr. Linda attempted to publish her findings in the Journal of the Optical Society of America in 1997. The paper was titled Anomalous Visual Phenomena in Spring-Fed Pools, a case study from Central Arizona. The paper described the observations, included witness statements, and presented photographic evidence showing that the figures were not captured on film despite being visible to multiple observers. The paper was rejected. Reviewers noted that photographs showing empty water while witnesses reported seeing figures suggested psychological rather than optical phenomena. One reviewer wrote, "Mass hallucination is more plausible than optical anomalies that selectively affect human perception while leaving photographic emulsion unaffected." Dr. Linda did not attempt to publish again. In a letter to Daniel Okafor, dated March 1998, she wrote, "I saw what I saw. We all did. I cannot explain it, but I also cannot deny it. The figures are there, regardless of whether we can photograph them or explain them." Between 1998 and 2010, at least 18 separate groups reported similar experiences at the pool. The reports are documented in wilderness permit files, trip reports, and online hiking forums. The descriptions are consistent. Figures visible in the water, usually between 2 and 6 individuals, wearing period clothing, standing motionless, watching. Contact with the water causes them to vanish. They return 48 hours later. In 2012, the Forest Service updated trail information for West Clear Creek Canyon. A note was added to the wilderness permit literature. Hikers report unusual visual phenomena at certain water features. These reports may be related to lighting conditions, altitude effects, or dehydration. Maintain proper hydration and rest schedules. No specific location was mentioned. No explanation was offered beyond the vague suggestions of environmental factors. In 2015, a canyoneering guide named Robert Takahashi brought a group to the pool. Takahashi had visited the site twice before and had seen the figures both times. He wanted to test whether they appeared to everyone or only certain individuals. His group consisted of 12 people, ranging in age from 19 to 62. When they reached the pool, Takahashi asked each person individually to approach and look into the water. 11 of the 12 people reported seeing figures. The descriptions varied slightly in detail, but all described people standing in the water, wearing old clothing, looking upward. One person saw nothing unusual. Takahashi documented the experience in his guide journal. He noted, "The one person who saw nothing was the youngest in our group, 19 years old. I don't know if that's relevant, but everyone else saw them." Different people, different backgrounds, same phenomenon. In 2019, a scientific team from Northern Arizona University attempted to reach the pool with ground-penetrating radar and underwater sonar equipment. The team's goal was to determine if subsurface geological features might create unusual optical conditions. Their permit was approved, and they began the hike. 2 miles from the pool, the lead researcher, Dr. Samuel Burgess, slipped on wet rocks and fractured his ankle. The team aborted the expedition and called for emergency helicopter evacuation. Dr. Burgess recovered but did not attempt to return to the site. When asked by a colleague if he planned to reschedule the study, he said, "I'm not sure we're supposed to understand that place." The pool remains accessible to experienced canyoneers willing to make the difficult hike. Most avoid it. Those who visit rarely stay long, but every 48 hours, the figures return, always standing in water that shows them clearly to the human eye, but never to any camera. Always watching the surface, always waiting for something. And if you stand at the edge long enough, you might notice something else. The figures are not all strangers. Sometimes someone in the water looks familiar, not someone you know, someone you used to be, or someone you will become. And they are always watching you back. Some groups are always larger than they should be. Antelope Canyon sits on Navajo land near Page, Arizona, carved by flash floods through Navajo sandstone over millions of years. The canyon consists of two sections, Upper Antelope Canyon and Lower Antelope Canyon, both slot canyons where walls rise over 120 feet and narrow passages measure as little as 3 feet across. Light beams penetrate the narrow openings during specific hours, creating photographs that have made the canyon world famous. The Navajo Nation regulates all access. Visitors must be accompanied by authorized guide, Des. The canyon is sacred to the Navajo people, who call it Se Big Hani Lini, meaning the place where water runs through rocks. In July 1994, a geological survey team from the University of Arizona entered Upper Antelope Canyon to document erosion patterns and sediment composition. The team consisted of 15 people, lead geologist Dr. Robert Finch, 12 graduate students, and 2 Navajo guides. They entered the canyon at 4 p.m., planning to complete their survey before sunset at 7:45 p.m. At 6:30 p.m., during the twilight transition, Dr. Finch conducted a head count before the team ascended a ladder to reach a higher section. He counted 16 people. He counted again. 16. He asked his assistant, graduate student Jessica Whitmore, to verify. She counted 16 as well. Finch called for everyone to gather in a wider section of the canyon. He counted faces. 15 people. He counted shadows on the canyon wall cast by the low-angle sunlight. 16 shadows. One shadow had no corresponding person. The shadow appeared human in proportion, standing among the group's shadows, but no one stood in the position that would cast it. Finch photographed the scene. When the image was developed, 16 shadows were clearly visible in the photograph. 15 people stood in the frame. Finch documented the incident in his field notes, but did not include it in his official geological report. He noted the time, lighting conditions, and the discrepancy. In his personal journal, he wrote, "Shadow without source. All team members accounted for physically. Cannot explain optical cause. Did not mention to students to avoid distraction from research objectives." In May 1997, a photography workshop led by professional photographer Daniel Mbatha brought 14 participants into Lower Antelope Canyon. They entered at 5:15 p.m. to capture the golden hour lighting. At 6 p.m., Mbatha arranged the group for a demonstration on composition and depth of field. He positioned the 14 participants in a line, with himself standing apart to photograph them. As he composed the shot through his viewfinder, he counted 15 people in the frame. He lowered the camera and counted visually. 14 participants, himself making 15 total. He looked through the viewfinder again. 15 people appeared in test. The line where 14 stood. Mbatha took the photograph. When processed, the image showed 14 people clearly visible, with a 15th figure standing at the end of the line. The 15th figure appeared slightly blurred, as if caught in motion, though everyone else in the photograph was sharp and still. The figure's features were indistinct, but the form was clearly human. Mbatha showed the photograph to his Navajo guide, William Tsosi. Tsosi looked at the image and said nothing for several seconds. Then he said, "You were here during the changing time. The light does this sometimes." When Mbatha asked for clarification, Tsosi replied, "We don't talk about the 16th walker. It's not our place to explain." Mbatha pressed for more information. Tsosi ended the conversation and suggested they leave the canyon before full darkness. In September 1999, an archaeological team documenting ancestral Puebloan sites in the canyon system encountered the same phenomenon. The team leader, Ometer Dr. Patricia Okonkwo, brought a group of 11 researchers into Upper Antelope Canyon at 4:45 p.m. They planned to photograph petroglyphs visible only during low-angle light conditions. At 6:20 p.m., Dr. Okonkwo noticed discrepancies in her head count. She counted 12 people 3 separate times. She called for everyone to stop work and assemble. 11 people gathered. She asked if anyone had wandered off. All team members were present. She checked again during the next 20 minutes as light continued to fade. Each time she counted, she arrived at 12. Each time she verified by calling names, only 11 people responded. One of her researchers, Marcus Delgado, suggested photographing the group to document positions for later reference. They set up a camera on a tripod with a timer. When the photograph developed, 12 figures appeared in the image. The 12th figure stood slightly behind and to the left of the group, partially obscured by shadow, but clearly present. No team member recalled standing in that position. Dr. Okonkwo filed a detailed incident report with the Navajo Nation Parks and Recreation Department, requesting information about optical phenomena in the canyon. Her request was acknowledged, but never answered. Between 2000 and 2003, 3 additional research teams reported similar experiences. All incidents occurred during twilight hours, defined as the period between 30 minutes before sunset and 15 minutes after sunset. All teams reported counting 1 additional person beyond their actual group size. All teams captured photographs showing extra figures or shadows with no corresponding physical presence. In 2004, optical physicist Dr. Raymond Kowalski from New Mexico State University learned about these reports through a colleague. Kowalski specialized in light behavior in confined spaces. He hypothesized that the canyon's geometry might create unusual reflection or refraction effects during specific lighting conditions. He applied for a research permit from the Navajo Nation. His application was denied without explanation. He reapplied twice. Both applications were denied. In 2006, he contacted Dr. Okonkwo, who shared her photographs and field notes. Kowalski analyzed the images using digital enhancement techniques. The extra figures in the photographs were not artifacts of film development or digital noise. They possessed depth, shadow, and position consistent with physical presence at the time of exposure. But their edges were slightly less defined than the actual people in the frames, suggesting either motion blur or some form of optical interference. Kowalski wrote a paper proposing that the canyon's specific geometry, combined with twilight's mixed wavelength light, might create conditions where scattered photons form coherent patterns resembling human figures. The paper was submitted to Applied Optics in 2007. Reviewers rejected it, noting that the proposed mechanism had no theoretical basis in established optical physics. One reviewer wrote, "The author attempts to explain photographic anomalies by inventing new phenomena rather than addressing more likely causes, such as equipment malfunction or deliberate manipulation." In 2009, journalist Sarah Alvarez investigated the phenomenon for a regional magazine. She interviewed 4 of the research team leaders and obtained copies of their photographs. She also spoke with 6 Navajo guides who worked in Antelope Canyon regularly. 5 declined to comment. One guide who requested anonymity told Alvarez, "My grandfather guided people through this canyon for 30 years. He said there's always one more shadow when the light changes. He said it's been this way since before tourists came. Before cameras, he said the canyon remembers everyone who walks through it, and sometimes it shows you who walked before." When Alvarez asked what that meant, the guide said, "The canyon keeps count. We're supposed to have 15 people in a group for safety. Sometimes the canyon counts 16. We've learned not to ask why. We just make sure all 15 living people get out safely." Alvarez's article was published in October 2009 under the title "The Phantom Hiker of Antelope Canyon." The article presented the documented incidents and included the photographs showing extra figures. The story circulated briefly online, but received little mainstream attention. In 2012, the Navajo Nation updated its guiding regulations for Antelope Canyon. New rules limited group sizes to a maximum of 15 people during twilight hours. The regulation included no explanation for the specific number or the time restriction. Tour companies were instructed to complete all canyon visits before 6 p.m. or after 8 p.m. during summer months, effectively eliminating twilight access. For most visitors, when tour operators questioned the new rules, they were told the restrictions were implemented for cultural preservation and visitor safety. No additional details were provided. Several operators protested, arguing the twilight hours provided the best photographic conditions. Their protests were denied. The regulations remained in place. In 2015, photographer Daniel Mbatha returned to Antelope Canyon for the first time since his 1997 experience. He applied for a special permit to photograph during twilight hours, citing his professional credentials and previous work. His permit was approved with conditions. He could enter only with an assigned guide, and he must exit before 6:30 p.m. Mbatha entered the canyon at 5:45 p.m. with his guide, Thomas Bigay. Mbatha set up his equipment quickly. At 6:15 p.m., he began taking photographs of the light beams penetrating the narrow canyon walls. At 6:22 p.m., Bigay told him it was time to leave. Mbatha requested 5 more minutes. Bigay refused and began packing Mbatha's equipment himself. As they walked toward the exit, Mbatha glanced back at the canyon. In the fading light, he saw a figure standing in the passage they had just left. The figure was motionless, barely visible in the shadows. Mbatha stopped and pointed. Bigay looked, said nothing, and continued walking. Mbatha asked if Bigay had seen the figure. Bigay replied, "We don't look back during the changing time. That's how you end up becoming the 16th. Mbatha did not ask what that meant. They exited the canyon at 6:31 p.m., 1 minute after the permitted time. Bigay filed a report noting the late departure. Mbatha's permit privileges were revoked. He was told he would not be allowed to return. Antelope Canyon remains one of Arizona's most photographed locations. Thousands of visitors walk through it annually. Tours operate throughout the day. Twilight access is restricted to specific circumstances and remains heavily regulated. The Navajo guides continue their work, leading groups safely through the narrow passages. But during training sessions for new guides, the elder guides share certain warnings. They mention the twilight head count. They explain that if a guide counts 16 shadows when 15 people are present, the guide should calmly lead the group out immediately without mentioning the discrepancy. They say the 16th walker is not dangerous, but its presence indicates something they don't fully discuss. One elder guide, speaking privately in 2022, said, "The canyon has walked with many people over many generations. Sometimes it walks with us again. We don't know if it's memory or something else. But we know it's been counted 16 times when 15 people walk. And we know that if you stay too long during the changing time, you might be the one the canyon remembers next." Antelope Canyon keeps its Amosti count. The photographs exist in private collections and research archives. The extra shadows appear in images taken decades apart by people who never met and never compared notes until researchers connected the incidents years later. 15 people walk in. 16 shadows walk with them. And when the light changes between day and night, the canyon conducts its census. Counting everyone who has ever walked through. Counting everyone who walks through now. And perhaps counting everyone who will walk through next. The numbers never match. They never have. And deep in the narrow passages where sandstone walls hold centuries of footsteps and whispers and fading light, something continues counting, always arriving at 16, always one more than should be there. Always present in the moment when daylight dies and darkness has not yet claimed its space. Always walking with the living, casting shadows that photographs remember even when memory cannot explain them. The canyon keeps counting, and the 16th walker keeps pace. Some voices broadcast from places that should be silent. Walnut Canyon National Monument lies 7 miles southeast of Flagstaff, Arizona, carved 400 feet deep through layers of Kaibab limestone and Coconino sandstone. The Sinagua people built cliff dwellings into the canyon walls between 1100 and 1200 AD, constructing over 25 rooms beneath natural rock overhangs. By 1300 AD, the settlement was abandoned. The canyon remained largely uninhabited until the late 1800s, when homesteaders and ranchers arrived. The area became a national monument in 1915. Today, the Park Service maintains a visitor center and a paved trail allowing access to several preserved cliff dwellings. Most of the canyon remains closed to public entry due to the fragile nature of the archaeological sites. In October 2006, amateur radio operator Vincent Holloway was conducting routine evening transmissions from his home 4 miles north of the monument. Holloway held an advanced class amateur radio license and had operated radio equipment for 31 years. He was transmitting on the 20-meter band, a frequency range commonly used for long-distance communication. At approximately 9:45 p.m., while scanning frequencies between 14.2 and 14.3 megahertz, he intercepted a transmission that should not have existed. The signal was clear and strong, with minimal static. A male voice spoke in measured cadence. Weather observation at Walnut Canyon Station. Sky clear. Temperature 43 degrees. Barometric pressure 29.87 and rising. Wind calm. Visibility unlimited. Observation complete at 2100 hours. The transmission ended. Holloway waited. 3 minutes later, the same transmission repeated verbatim, identical phrasing and timing. He recorded the third repetition on audio cassette. The voice used radio protocol language common in military and weather service communications from the mid-20th century. The format matched National Weather Service observation reports from the 1940s and 50s. But the frequency was no longer allocated to weather services. It had been reassigned to amateur radio use in 1973. Holloway checked current weather conditions. The reported temperature of 43 degrees matched conditions at Flagstaff Airport within 2 degrees. Barometric pressure was accurate. The observation was current and correct, but the transmission protocol was obsolete by 50 years. Over the following week, Holloway intercepted the transmission 6 more times, always between 9:45 and 10:15 p.m. The content changed to reflect actual weather conditions, but always used the same antiquated format and terminology. He contacted 2 fellow ham radio operators in the area, Thomas Reyes and Patricia Gorski. Both confirmed they could receive the transmission. Direction-finding equipment indicated the signal originated from within Walnut Canyon National Monument, approximately 2.3 miles southeast of Holloway's location. In November 2006, the 3 operators brought portable direction-finding equipment to the monument during evening hours. They set up at 3 different locations around the canyon rim and simultaneously recorded the bearing to the signal source. Triangulation placed the transmission origin in a section of the canyon closed to public access, an area containing several collapsed and unstable cliff dwellings. Holloway filed a report with the Federal Communications Commission, noting unauthorized transmissions on amateur radio frequencies. The FCC acknowledged receipt, but took no action. Holloway also informed the National Park Service. A ranger responded that no communication equipment was operated by the Park Service in that section of the canyon and suggested the signal might be reflecting off canyon walls from a distant source. Thomas Reyes, who had worked as a broadcast engineer for 23 years, analyzed the signal characteristics. The transmission showed no evidence of atmospheric skip or ionospheric reflection. It was a local signal originating within 5 miles of the receivers. The signal's strength and clarity indicated a transmitter operating with at least 100 watts of power. Reyes documented his findings in a technical report dated December 2006. He concluded, "Signal origin is local and stationary. Transmission format matches U.S. Weather Bureau procedures discontinued in 1952. No licensed amateur or commercial transmitter operates in the identified location." In January 2007, Holloway contacted Dr. Margaret Lind, an archaeologist who had published research on Sinagua settlement patterns at Walnut Canyon. He asked if any historical radio installations had existed in the monument. Dr. Linda confirmed that no radio equipment had ever been documented in the archaeological record. The Sinagua cliff dwellings predated radio technology by 7 centuries. She suggested the transmission might originate from abandoned Forest Service equipment, though she knew of no such installations in that area. Between January and May 2007, the 3 radio operators recorded 43 separate transmissions. All followed the same format. All reported accurate, current weather observations. All used communication protocols from the early 1950s. The voice remained consistent across all recordings: male, calm, professional, with no regional accent or emotional inflection. In March 2007, Patricia Gorski noticed something unusual. One transmission included a reference to a landmark: visibility unlimited, East Rim Trail clear, South Ridge shows light snow accumulation. The East Rim Trail had not existed in the 1950s. It was constructed by the park. Service in 1972. Yet the transmission used terminology and format from 2 decades before the trail existed. Gorski compiled a list of landmarks mentioned in the transmissions. Several references matched current trail names and geographical features designated after 1952. The phantom broadcaster was describing the modern landscape using obsolete communication protocols. In June 2007, the 3 operators obtained permission from the Park Service to enter the restricted section of the canyon, where their direction-finding equipment indicated the signal originated. They were accompanied by Ranger David Whitmore. The group hiked 2 miles along the canyon rim and descended to the identified location using technical climbing equipment. They found a collapsed cliff dwelling, partially buried by rockfall. The structure consisted of 3 rooms built into a natural alcove approximately 30 feet above the current canyon floor. The walls were intact, but the roof had collapsed, filling the interior with rubble. No entrance remained accessible. No modern materials were visible. No evidence of recent human presence existed. The group set up receiving equipment at the site. At 9:52 p.m., the transmission began. The signal was stronger than at any previous location. The direction-finding antenna pointed directly at the collapsed dwelling. The transmission appeared to originate from within or beneath the rubble-filled structure. Ranger Whitmore documented the findings in an incident report dated June 14, 2007. He noted, "Radio signal traced to archaeological site containing no visible modern equipment. Site has been sealed by natural rockfall for an estimated 800 years. No explanation for transmission source." In August 2007, the Park Service contacted the FCC again, requesting a formal investigation. The FCC assigned enforcement agent Robert Ferraro to investigate unauthorized transmissions. Ferraro visited the site in September 2007 with spectrum analysis equipment. He confirmed the transmission's presence and local origin. His equipment detected no other radio frequency activity in the area. The transmission appeared on a single frequency with no harmonics or spurious emissions typical of amateur transmitters. Ferraro's report, filed in October 2007, stated, "Signal characteristics consistent with professionally maintained broadcast equipment." No licensed station operates on this frequency in this location. Direction finding confirms signal originates from within Walnut Canyon National Monument, Restricted Archaeological Zone. Recommend physical inspection of suspected transmission site to locate and disable unauthorized equipment. The Park Service denied the request for excavation. The site was protected under the Archaeological Resources Protection Act. Disturbing the cliff dwelling would require extensive permitting and justification. The Park Service determined that investigating an unexplained radio signal did not meet the threshold for disturbing a protected archaeological site. In November 2007, Dr. Margaret Lind reviewed historical records seeking any connection between Walnut Canyon and early radio operations. She found one reference. In 1951, the U.S. Air Force had conducted atmospheric research in the Flagstaff area, including radio propagation studies. A temporary weather observation post had been established at an undisclosed location in the vicinity of Walnut Canyon to support the research. The post operated for 6 months and was dismantled in early 1952. No records specified the exact location. Dr. Lindy contacted Air Force Archives requesting documentation. The archives confirmed the research program's existence, but stated that operational details, including specific site locations, were not available. The records were classified at the time and subsequently lost or destroyed under routine document retention policies. Between 2008 and 2015, the transmissions continued. Ham radio operators throughout northern Arizona reported receiving the signal. Online forums dedicated to anomalous radio phenomena documented dozens of independent observations. All described the same characteristics: weather observations in obsolete format, accurate current conditions, signal originating from Walnut Canyon. In 2016, audio engineer Marcus Takahashi analyzed recordings of the transmission using voice printing technology. He compared the phantom broadcaster's voice against historical recordings of Air Force and Weather Bureau personnel from the 1950s. No match was found. Takahashi noted that the voice exhibited unusual consistency across years of recordings. Natural human speech shows variation in pitch, tempo, and inflection over time. The phantom broadcaster's voice showed no variation whatsoever between 2006 and 2016. In his analysis report, Takahashi wrote, "The voice appears to be either an automated system using synthesized speech or a recording played on an endless loop. However, the content changes to reflect current weather conditions, eliminating the possibility of a simple recording. If synthesized, the technology would need to be sophisticated enough to generate natural-sounding speech while varying content based on real-time weather data. Such technology existed in 2016, but not in 1952, the era the transmission format suggests." In 2019, the National Park Service updated its restricted area maps for Walnut Canyon. The section containing the collapsed cliff dwelling where the signal originated was reclassified from temporary closure to permanent closure for archaeological preservation. No explanation for the change was provided in public documentation. Vincent Holloway continued monitoring the frequency until his death in 2021. His final logbook entry, dated March 2021, noted, "Same transmission, same voice, same format, 14 years without variation except weather data. Whatever is broadcasting knows what's happening now, but speaks like it's still 1952. The transmissions continue. Amateur radio operators in Arizona still intercept them during evening hours. The voice still reports weather conditions with perfect accuracy. The format still matches protocols discontinued 70 years ago. The signal still originates from a collapsed cliff dwelling that has been sealed since the 12th century. And on the recordings made over 15 years, if you listen carefully between the weather observations, There is something else. A faint sound beneath the voice. Not static, not interference. Something rhythmic. Something that might be breathing, or might be something else entirely. Something that keeps time while a voice that should not exist reports conditions in a world that has moved on without it. Broadcasting from stone rooms where no transmitter should be. Following procedures from an era that ended before most people listening were born. Watching the weather, keeping the schedule, speaking into a darkness that somehow, impossibly, still carries the signal out into the night air above a canyon where ancient people once lived, and where something now speaks with a voice that never changes, never stops, and never explains why it continues counting the temperature and pressure and wind, while the world listens and wonders what machine or memory or something else entirely keeps broadcasting from the ruins night after night, year after year, always accurate, always obsolete, always there. Some colors exist only on film. Salt River Canyon cuts through the Natanz Plateau in eastern Arizona, descending 2,000 feet from rim to river bottom. The canyon marks the boundary between the Fort Apache Indian Reservation and Tonto National Forest. State Route 60 crosses the canyon via a steel bridge built in 1934, replacing a treacherous dirt road that claimed multiple lives in the early 1900s. The Apache people have inhabited this region for centuries. The canyon is sacred in their traditions, though specific beliefs are rarely discussed with outsiders. The area is remote. Cell phone coverage is non-existent for miles in either direction. Summer temperatures exceed 110 degrees. Flash floods occur regularly during monsoon season. In June 1989, landscape photographer Daniel Kowalski was documenting Arizona canyon systems for a conservation project. He spent 3 days photographing Salt River Canyon from various angles and elevations. When he developed his film, he noticed an anomaly. In one sequence of photographs taken from a pullout approximately 2 miles north of the bridge, the air itself appeared blue, not sky blue, not atmospheric haze, a distinct azure glow that seemed to emanate from the space between his lens and the canyon walls. Trees appeared normal. Rock faces showed accurate color. The gravel pullout where he'd stood was correctly exposed, but the air glowed blue. Kowalski assumed a film development error. He'd shot the sequence on Kodachrome 64, a professional film known for color accuracy. He checked his other rolls from the same day. Those photographs showed normal atmospheric conditions. Only the sequence from that specific location exhibited the blue air phenomenon. In July 1989, Kowalski returned to the exact pullout with fresh film and different camera equipment. He shot identical compositions. When developed, the images showed the same blue atmospheric glow. He photographed at different times of day, morning, afternoon, late evening. The blue glow appeared in every frame, though its intensity varied slightly with lighting conditions. Kowalski documented his findings but did not publish them. He noted the GPS coordinates and filed the photographs in his archive. In his project notes, he wrote, "Atmospheric color anomaly at Salt River Canyon mile marker 234, no visible cause, repeatable across multiple sessions and equipment. Recommend investigation by atmospheric scientists or optical specialists." In May 1996, amateur photographer Susan Reyes was traveling Route 60 and stopped at the same pullout to photograph the canyon. She used a digital camera, one of the early consumer models with a resolution of 0.3 megapixels. When she reviewed her images that evening, she noticed the blue atmospheric effect. She assumed her camera's white balance was malfunctioning. She deleted the images and forgot about the incident. 3 months later, Reyes returned to the location with her husband, Marcus Reyes, who worked as a television news cameraman. She described the blue photographs. Marcus suggested they test the phenomenon with professional equipment. They visited the pullout in August 1996 with a broadcast-quality video camera. Marcus recorded 15 minutes of footage panning across the canyon. When reviewed, the footage showed the same effect. Normal color for solid objects, blue atmospheric glow in the space between camera and landscape. Marcus Reyes contacted Daniel Kowalski after finding reference to his earlier observations in a photography forum. The two men compared their findings. The phenomenon occurred in photographs and video. It appeared regardless of film type, digital sensor, or camera brand. It was localized to a specific section of the canyon, roughly a quarter-mile stretch, centered on mile marker 234. The effect was seasonal, appearing only between May and September. In September 1996, Kowalski and Reyes brought an atmospheric scientist, Dr. Patricia Gorski from Northern Arizona University, to the location. Dr. Gorski specialized in light scattering and atmospheric optics. She brought equipment to measure particulate density, humidity, and atmospheric composition. Gorski's instruments detected no unusual atmospheric conditions. Particulate levels were normal for a desert canyon environment. Humidity and temperature matched regional averages. Air samples collected at the site showed standard composition. There were no suspended crystals, no unusual pollens, no smoke or dust concentrations that might explain optical effects. Dr. Gorski photographed the canyon using cameras equipped with polarizing filters, which eliminate glare and reduce atmospheric haze. The blue glow persisted in the images. She used spectroscopic equipment to analyze light wavelengths at the site. The analysis showed normal solar spectrum with no unusual peaks or anomalies. The blue color existed in photographs, but not in direct spectroscopic measurement. In her preliminary report, dated October 1996, Gorski wrote, "The phenomenon appears to be a photographic artifact rather than an atmospheric condition. However, the artifact manifests across multiple technologies, film, digital sensors, video systems, which is inconsistent with typical camera malfunctions. The effect is geographically specific and seasonally consistent, suggesting environmental factors we cannot currently measure." Between 1997 and 2003, at least 23 independent photographers reported the blue air phenomenon at the same location. Reports came through photography forums, travel blogs, and occasional letters to the Arizona Department of Transportation. Most photographers assumed equipment problems. Few investigated further. In 2004, optical physicist Dr. Raymond Finch from the University of Arizona learned about the phenomenon through a colleague. Finch specialized in anomalous optical effects and had published research on atmospheric mirage formation. He visited the Salt River Canyon location in June 2004 with comprehensive measurement equipment. Finch spent 6 days at the site, photographing with 15 different camera systems spanning film, digital, and video technologies. All systems captured the blue atmospheric glow. He used thermal imaging cameras to detect temperature gradients that might cause light refraction. No unusual gradients existed. He measured electromagnetic fields, searching for evidence that might interfere with electronic sensors. Readings were normal. Finch examined historical photographs of the canyon. He located images from the Arizona Historical Society archive dating to 1889. One photograph, taken by an unknown photographer, showed the Salt River Canyon from approximately the same vantage point. The century-old image exhibited the same blue atmospheric effect. Dr. Finch's findings were documented in a paper submitted to the Journal of the Optical Society of America in 2005. The paper included comparative photographs, spectroscopic data, and historical image analysis. The paper was rejected. Reviewers stated that the phenomenon likely resulted from improper film storage or digital processing errors. One reviewer noted, "The consistency across technologies and time periods is curious but insufficient to establish a genuine optical anomaly without a plausible physical mechanism." Finch did not resubmit the paper. In correspondence with Daniel Kowalski, he wrote, "I cannot explain what causes the effect, but I can confirm it is real, repeatable, and has persisted for at least 116 years. Whatever creates this phenomenon operates at the boundary between physical reality and photographic capture." In 2009, journalist Marcus Delgado investigated the phenomenon for a regional magazine. He interviewed 7 photographers who had documented the blue air, including Kowalski, Reyes, and Finch. He also spoke with residents of the Fort Apache Indian Reservation. One elder who requested anonymity told Delgado, "That place has always been like that. My grandfather said the air there holds old prayers. When you try to capture it with your camera, you catch the color of those prayers instead of just the air. He said it's not meant to be photographed. Some things are meant to be seen only with your own eyes." When Delgado asked for clarification, the elder declined to elaborate. He said only, "The canyon keeps some things for itself. What you see and what your camera sees are not always the same." Delgado's article was published in August 2009 under the title "The Blue Air Mystery of Salt River Canyon." The article presented the documented cases and included sample photographs. The story circulated online briefly, but received limited mainstream attention. In 2012, the Arizona Department of Transportation repaved Route 60 through the canyon section. The pullout at mile marker 234 was expanded and improved as part of the project. During construction, workers excavated approximately 4 feet of material to prepare the new foundation. No unusual objects or materials were discovered. The construction foreman's report noted normal decomposed granite and sedimentary layers. After construction completed, photographers returned to the location. The blue air phenomenon persisted unchanged. In 2015, Dr. Patricia Gorski organized a multi-day observation session at the site, inviting specialists from atmospheric science, photography, and optical physics. The team included 8 researchers and graduate students. They set up equipment for continuous monitoring from May 15th through May 20th. The blue atmospheric effect appeared in every photograph taken during the observation period. The team captured over 2,000 images using various technologies. Analysis confirmed that solid objects showed accurate color while the air displayed the azure glow. The effect was strongest during midday hours and diminished but remained visible during morning and evening. One graduate student, Jennifer Mbatha, noted something unusual. She compared photographs taken in sequence from the exact same position. In some images, the blue glow appeared uniform. In others, it showed subtle variations in intensity, creating what resembled patterns or shapes within the blue atmosphere. The patterns were not random. They repeated across multiple images with slight variations. Mbatha's observation prompted the team to analyze the blue-affected areas more carefully. Using digital enhancement, they isolated the blue channel data. The intensity variations formed structures that resembled interference patterns, the kind created when 2 wave sources overlap and create zones of reinforcement and cancellation. Dr. Gorski noted in her field journal, "The blue effect may not be a simple color shift, but rather evidence of some form of wave interference occurring in the atmosphere. However, we detect no wave sources, no electromagnetic emissions, no acoustic phenomena, nothing that should create interference patterns. If waves are present, they exist outside our measurement capability." The research team's findings were compiled into a technical report but never submitted for publication. Dr. Gorski cited the lack of a theoretical framework as the reason. In 2016, she told a colleague, "We documented something happening. We can show it's real and repeatable, but we cannot explain what it is or why it occurs. Publishing that feels incomplete." Salt River Canyon remains a popular destination for travelers and photographers. State Route 60 carries thousands of vehicles through the canyon annually. The pullout at mile marker 234 offers scenic views and interpretive signs about canyon geology. No signs mention the blue air phenomenon. Photographers still stop there. Some notice the blue atmospheric glow in their images. Most attribute it to camera settings or atmospheric conditions. A few recognize it as the documented mystery. Fewer still investigate deeper. The phenomenon continues. Every May through September, cameras at that specific location capture blue air. The effect appears in smartphone photos, professional equipment, vintage film cameras, and modern digital systems. The intensity varies slightly day to day, but the color remains constant, a particular shade of azure that appears nowhere else in the visible spectrum at that intensity. And in the archives, the 1889 photograph sits preserved behind glass. The oldest documented evidence, the blue glow unchanged across 136 years, the same color, the same location, the same mystery. Whatever creates it has been there longer than photography itself, longer than cameras existed to capture it. Present when only human eyes could see the canyon. Present now when digital sensors record what human eyes alone cannot confirm. The air photographs blue. It has always photographed blue. And no one can explain why the atmosphere in that quarter mile remembers colors that should not exist in the natural world. Colors that cameras see, but spectroscopes cannot measure. Colors that persist through seasons and centuries. Colors that may be capturing something older than light itself. Something that exists in the space between seeing and knowing. Between presence and evidence. Between what is and what photographs prove was there. The blue remains. The cameras record it. The canyon keeps it secret. And every summer, when the light falls just right and someone stops to photograph the view, they carry away images of air that glows with a color no one has named. Air that remembers something. Air that shows itself only to machines that capture light. Air that has been blue since before anyone thought to ask why. Some trails end where nothing should begin. The north rim of Grand Canyon National Park receives a fraction of the visitors who crowd the south rim. Elevation reaches 8,000 feet. Snow closes roads from mid-October through mid-May. The terrain is rugged, heavily forested with ponderosa pine and aspen. Fewer than 10% of Grand Canyon visitors see the north rim. Many areas remain wilderness, accessible only by unmarked trails or cross-country navigation. The Kaibab Plateau stretches for miles, cut by deep side canyons and limestone cliffs that drop hundreds of feet without warning. Cell service is non-existent. Rangers patrol infrequently. People disappear here. In September 2003, Ranger Thomas Whitmore was conducting a routine patrol along the Thunder River Trail, a remote route requiring 2 days of hiking to reach the Colorado River. At approximately 7 a.m., Whitmore noticed tracks crossing the trail. The tracks were barefoot, human, and fresh, pressed into dust still damp from overnight moisture. The stride length suggested an adult, estimated weight between 150 and 170 pounds. The tracks came from dense forest to the north, crossed the trail, and continued south toward the canyon rim. Whitmore followed the tracks for half a mile. They led directly to a cliff edge overlooking a 400-foot drop into Tapeats Creek Canyon. The tracks stopped at the precipice. The final print showed toes extending past the edge. Whitmore examined the area carefully. No scuff marks indicated someone stopping abruptly. No signs of climbing equipment. No rope grooves on trees or rocks. The tracks simply ended. Whitmore radioed for assistance and initiated a search below the cliff. A helicopter was dispatched. Search teams spent 6 hours examining the canyon floor and surrounding slopes. They found no body, no blood, no torn clothing, no disturbed vegetation suggesting a fall. The cliff face was sheer. A person falling from that height would have left evidence. Whitmore documented the incident in his patrol report dated September 14, 2003. He included photographs of the tracks and the cliff edge. His report concluded, no evidence of foul play, no evidence of accident, no explanation for track termination at cliff edge. Footprints appear to show individual walking directly off precipice. The incident was filed and archived at. No missing person reports matched the time frame or location. In June 2007, Ranger Patricia Vega discovered similar tracks while patrolling Cape Royal, a popular overlook on the North Rim. The tracks appeared overnight, pressed into sandy soil near the parking area. They were barefoot, human, leading from the forest toward the rim. Vega followed them. The tracks led to the edge of a 600-foot vertical drop, stopped, and disappeared. Vega's report, filed June 9, 2007, noted, tracks consistent with adult. Human barefoot steady gait showing no signs of distress or hesitation. Terminus at cliff edge with no indication of fall or return path. Search of area below cliff revealed no evidence of human remains or recent disturbance. Between 2007 and 2010, rangers documented 11 separate incidents of barefoot tracks leading to cliff edges throughout the North Rim. All tracks appeared overnight. All led directly to precipices. None showed return paths. Search operations found no evidence of falls. In March 2011, seasonal ranger David Okafor was assigned to investigate the recurring phenomenon. Okafor had 15 years of experience in wilderness search and rescue. He reviewed all previous incident reports and identified patterns. The tracks appeared between April and October, never during winter. They occurred in remote areas with limited human traffic. Most significantly, the tracks always led to cliffs with drops exceeding 300 feet. Okafor set up motion-activated cameras at 3 locations where tracks had previously appeared. The cameras operated for 6 weeks. They captured wildlife, passing hikers, and routine environmental activity. No footage showed anyone creating the mysterious tracks. On May 17, 2011, Okafor discovered fresh tracks during a patrol near Point Sublime, one of the most remote overlooks on the North Rim. The tracks were exceptionally clear, pressed into soft soil after recent rain. Okafor documented them with photographs and detailed measurements: foot length 10.4 inches, width 3.8 inches, stride 31 inches, depth consistent throughout, suggesting steady walking pace. Okafor followed the tracks. They led through open forest for 3.7 miles, maintaining straight-line direction toward the canyon rim. The path crossed fallen logs, rocky outcrops, and dense brush. The barefoot impressions showed no hesitation, no deviation, no signs of injury, despite rough terrain. At 10:27 a.m., Okafor reached the canyon edge. The tracks led to an 800-foot vertical cliff overlooking Shinumo Creek. The final footprint showed toes extending over the rim. The print was clear, well-defined, showing no evidence of sliding or stumbling. Okafor marked the location and immediately called for search and rescue. A helicopter arrived within 90 minutes. The crew conducted aerial search of the cliff base and surrounding area. Ground teams rappelled the cliff face, searching for evidence. The search continued for 3 days. 26 personnel participated. They found nothing. Dr. Margaret Alvarez, a forensic anthropologist from Northern Arizona University, was consulted to analyze the track photographs. Alvarez confirmed the prints were consistent with human feet, adult male, size 10 to 11 shoe equivalent. Gait analysis showed normal walking pattern with no abnormalities. In her report, Alvarez noted, "The stride and depth indicate purposeful walking at normal pace, no signs of running, stumbling, or distress. Individual appears to have walked calmly to cliff edge and continued forward." In July 2011, the National Park Service convened an internal review of the incidents. Senior rangers, law enforcement personnel, and safety officers examined the documented cases. The review considered multiple explanations: elaborate hoaxes, criminal activity, unreported suicides. Each theory was evaluated and found lacking. Hoaxes seemed unlikely given the remote locations, overnight appearance of tracks, and absence of retreat paths. Creating false tracks leading to cliff edges in wilderness areas would require significant effort and equipment. Motion-activated cameras would have detected such activity. Criminal activity or suicide attempts did not explain the absence of bodies. Even if remains were removed, evidence of falls, blood, tissue, some disturbed vegetation should persist. Search teams found nothing. The review concluded with a recommendation to continue monitoring and documentation, but offered no explanation for the phenomenon. The final report, dated August 2011, stated, "Incidents represent unexplained anomalies in wilderness areas. No evidence of criminal activity. No evidence of missing persons. Recommend continued vigilance and reporting." In 2012, David Okafor spoke off-record with a journalist researching unexplained wilderness phenomena. Okafor described an additional detail he had not included in official reports. While following the 3.7-mile track on May 17, 2011, he noticed the footprints showed no accumulation of dirt or debris between the toes or on the soles. Barefoot walking through forest terrain typically leaves evidence: small stones lodged in impressions, plant material pressed into soil. These tracks were clean, as if the feet creating them touched ground but collected nothing. Okafor also noted that the track depth remained consistent throughout the 3.7 miles. Normal walking shows variation, deeper impressions on slopes, lighter prints on level ground, scuff marks at turns. These tracks showed uniform depth despite terrain changes. In his words, "It was like watching someone walk on perfectly level ground, even though the actual terrain varied significantly." Between 2012 and 2023, rangers documented 18 additional incidents. The pattern remained consistent. All tracks appeared overnight in remote locations. All led to cliff edges exceeding 300 feet in height. All terminated with no evidence of falls or return paths. In 2019, the Park Service updated its search and rescue protocols to include specific procedures for edge-terminating track discoveries. Rangers are instructed to document tracks photographically, measure stride and depth, follow cautiously to terminus, and immediately initiate search operations below cliff. The protocols acknowledge that searches typically yield no results, but must be conducted for liability purposes. The protocols include a note: "These incidents represent a recurring wilderness anomaly without clear explanation. Documentation is essential for future analysis." In 2022, Tribal Liaison Officer Jennifer Begay spoke with Kaibab Paiute elders about the footprints. One elder, who requested anonymity, told Begay, "Those are the walking away tracks. They've been here longer than the Park Service, longer than tourists. My grandfather's grandfather knew about them. He said they're people who decided to walk between worlds. They walk to the edge and keep walking, not falling, walking. The earth on this side ends, but their path continues on a side we can't see." When Begay asked for clarification, the elder said, "Some people are called to walk away from this world. The tracks show where they accepted the call. They're not dead, they're just walking somewhere else now." Begay included this conversation in a cultural context report submitted to Park Service Administration. The report was filed but not distributed publicly. The North Rim remains remote and beautiful. Thousands of visitors come each year, mostly staying near developed overlooks. Few venture into wilderness areas where the tracks appear. Rangers continue their patrols, watching for fresh impressions in dust and soil. And every few months, someone finds them. Barefoot tracks pressed firmly into earth, leading with purpose through forest and over rock, maintaining direction toward canyon edges where the ground ends and space begins, walking steadily, calmly, as if the cliff edge were not an ending but a threshold. The tracks stop where nothing should continue, toes extending past solid ground into air. No signs of fear or hesitation, no evidence of falling or dying. Just footprints walking into emptiness, as if emptiness were solid. As if the final step were not the last, but simply the next. As if somewhere below the cliff, or beyond it, or in some direction that cameras cannot capture and search teams cannot follow. The walking continues. The prints remain in photographs, documented and measured. The cliffs remain vertical and deadly. The space between footprint and ground below remains empty except for air and absence. And no one has explained where the walking ends, or if it ends at all, or what path continues beyond the edge where barefoot tracks stop recording their passage on earth that witnesses can see and touch and search without ever finding what comes next. The footprints lead nowhere, they have always led nowhere, and still they appear. Walking forward, walking away, walking toward edges where the ground remembers their passing but yields no answers about what lies beyond. Some trails end where nothing should begin. The North Rim of Grand Canyon National Park receives a fraction of the visitors who crowd the South Rim. Elevation reaches 8,000 feet. Snow closes roads from mid-October through mid-May. The terrain is rugged, heavily forested with ponderosa pine and aspen. Fewer than 10% of Grand Canyon visitors see the North Rim. Many areas remain wilderness, accessible only by unmarked trails or cross-country navigation. The Kaibab Plateau stretches for miles, cut by deep side canyons and limestone cliffs that drop hundreds of feet without warning. Cell service is non-existent. Rangers patrol infrequently. People disappear here. In September 2003, Ranger Thomas Whitmore was conducting a routine patrol along the Thunder River Trail, a remote route requiring 2 days of hiking to reach the Colorado River. At approximately 7 a.m., Whitmore noticed tracks crossing the trail. The tracks were barefoot, human, and fresh, pressed into dust, still damp from overnight moisture. The stride length suggested an adult, estimated weight between 150 and 170 pounds. The tracks came from dense forest to the north, crossed the trail, and continued south toward the canyon rim. Whitmore followed the tracks for half a mile. They led directly to a cliff edge overlooking a 400-foot drop into Tapeats Creek Canyon. The tracks stopped at the precipice. The final print showed toes extending past the edge. Whitmore examined the area carefully. No scuff marks indicated someone stopping abruptly. No signs of climbing equipment. No rope grooves on trees or rocks. The tracks simply ended. Whitmore radioed for assistance and initiated a search below the cliff. A helicopter was dispatched. Search teams spent 6 hours examining the canyon floor and surrounding slopes. They found no body, no blood, no torn clothing, no disturbed vegetation suggesting a fall. The cliff face was sheer. A person falling from that height would have left evidence. Whitmore documented the incident in his patrol report dated September 14, 2003. He included photographs of the tracks and the cliff edge. His report concluded, no evidence of foul play, no evidence of accident, no explanation for track termination at cliff edge. Footprints appear to show individual walking directly off precipice. The incident was filed and archived. No missing person reports match the time frame or location. In June 2007, Ranger Patricia Vega discovered similar tracks while patrolling Cape Royal, a popular overlook on the North Rim. The tracks appeared overnight, pressed into sandy soil near the parking area. They were barefoot, human, leading from the forest toward the rim. Vega followed them. The tracks led to the edge of a 600-foot vertical drop, stopped, and disappeared. Vega's report, filed June 9, 2007, noted tracks consistent with adult. Human, barefoot, steady gait showing no signs of distress or hesitation. Terminus at cliff edge with no indication of fall or return path. Search of area below cliff revealed no evidence of human remains or recent disturbance. Between 2007 and 2010, rangers documented 11 separate incidents of barefoot tracks leading to cliff edges throughout the North Rim. All tracks appeared overnight. All led directly to precipices. None showed return paths. Search operations found no evidence of falls. In March 2011, seasonal ranger David Okafor was assigned to investigate the recurring phenomenon. Okafor had 15 years of experience in wilderness search and rescue. He reviewed all previous incident reports and identified patterns. The tracks appeared between April and October, never during winter. They occurred in remote areas with limited human traffic. Most significantly, the tracks always led to cliffs with drops exceeding 300 feet. Okafor set up motion-activated cameras at 3 locations where tracks had previously appeared. The cameras operated for 6 weeks. They captured wildlife, passing hikers, and routine environmental activity. No footage showed anyone creating the mysterious tracks. On May 17, 2011, Okafor discovered fresh tracks during a patrol near Point Sublime, one of the most remote overlooks on the North Rim. The tracks were exceptionally clear, pressed into soft soil after recent rain. Okafor documented them with photographs and detailed measurements. Foot length, 10.4 inches. Width, 3.8 inches. Stride, 31 inches. Depth consistent throughout, suggesting steady walking pace. Okafor followed the tracks. They led through open forest for 3.7 miles, maintaining straight-line direction toward the canyon rim. The path crossed fallen logs, rocky outcrops, and dense brush. The barefoot impressions showed no hesitation, no deviation, no signs of injury despite rough terrain. At 10:27 a.m., Okafor reached the canyon edge. The tracks led to an 800-foot vertical cliff overlooking Shinumo Creek. The final footprint showed toes extending over the rim. The print was clear, well-defined, showing no evidence of sliding or stumbling. Okafor marked the location and immediately called for search and rescue. A helicopter arrived within 90 minutes. The crew conducted aerial search of the cliff base and surrounding area. Ground teams rappelled the cliff face, searching for evidence. The search continued for 3 days. 26 personnel participated. They found nothing. Dr. Margaret Alvarez, a forensic anthropologist from Northern Arizona University, was consulted to analyze the track photographs. Alvarez confirmed the prints were consistent with human feet, adult male, size 10 to 11 shoe equivalent. Gait analysis showed normal walking pattern with no abnormalities. In her report, Alvarez noted, "The stride and depth indicate purposeful walking at normal pace. No signs of running, stumbling, or distress. Individual appears to have walked calmly to cliff edge and continued forward." In July 2011, the National Park Service convened an internal review of the incidents. Senior rangers, law enforcement personnel, and safety officers examined the documented cases. The review considered multiple explanations, elaborate hoaxes, criminal activity, unreported suicides, Each theory was evaluated and found lacking. Hoaxes seemed unlikely given the remote locations, overnight appearance of tracks, and absence of retreat paths. Creating false tracks leading to cliff edges in wilderness areas would require significant effort and equipment. Motion-activated cameras would have detected such activity. Criminal activity or suicide attempts did not explain the absence of bodies. Even if remains were removed, evidence of falls, blood, tissue, disturbed vegetation should persist. Search teams found nothing. The review concluded with a recommendation to continue monitoring and documentation, but offered no explanation for the phenomenon. The final report, dated August 2011, stated, "Incidents represent unexplained anomalies in wilderness areas. No evidence of criminal activity. No evidence of missing persons. Recommend continued vigilance and reporting." In 2012, David Okafor spoke off-record with a journalist researching unexplained wilderness phenomena. Okafor described an additional detail he had not included in official reports. While following the 3.7-mile track on May 17, 2011, he noticed the footprints showed no accumulation of dirt or debris between the toes or on the soles. Barefoot walking through forest terrain typically leaves evidence: small stones lodged in impressions, plant material pressed into soil. These tracks were clean, as if the feet creating them touched ground but collected nothing. Okafor also noted that the track depth remained consistent throughout the 3.7 miles. Normal walking shows variation, deeper impressions on slopes, lighter prints on level ground, scuff marks at turns. These tracks showed uniform depth despite terrain changes. In his words, "It was like watching someone walk on perfectly level ground, even though the actual terrain varied significantly." Between 2012 and 2023, rangers documented 18 additional incidents. The pattern remained consistent. All tracks appeared overnight in remote locations. All led to cliff edges exceeding 300 feet in height. All terminated with no evidence of falls or return paths. In 2019, the Park Service updated its search and rescue protocols to include specific procedures for edge-terminating track discoveries. Rangers are instructed to document tracks photographically, measure stride and depth, follow cautiously to terminus, and immediately initiate search operations below cliff. The protocols acknowledge that searches typically yield no results but must be conducted for liability purposes. The protocols include a note: "These incidents represent a recurring wilderness anomaly without clear explanation. Documentation is essential for future analysis." In 2022, Tribal Liaison Officer Jennifer Begay spoke with Kaibab Paiute elders about the footprints. One elder, who requested anonymity, told Begay, "Those are the walking away tracks. They've been here longer than the Park Service, longer than tourists. My grandfather's grandfather knew about them. He said they're people who decided to walk between worlds. They walk to the edge and keep walking, not falling, walking. The earth on this side ends, but their path continues on a side we can't see." When Begay asked for clarification, the elder said, "Some people are called to walk away from this world. The tracks show where they accepted the call. They're not dead, they're just walking somewhere else now." Begay included this conversation in a cultural context report submitted to Park Service Administration. The report was filed but not distributed publicly. The North Rim remains remote and beautiful. Thousands of visitors come each year, mostly staying near developed overlooks. Few venture into wilderness areas where the tracks appear. Rangers continue their patrols, watching for fresh impressions in dust and soil. And every few months, someone finds them. Barefoot tracks pressed firmly into earth, leading with purpose through forest and over rock, maintaining direction toward canyon edges where the ground ends and space begins. walking steadily, calmly, as if the cliff edge were not an ending, but a threshold. The tracks stop where nothing should continue, toes extending past solid ground into air. No signs of fear or hesitation. No evidence of falling or dying, just footprints walking into emptiness as if emptiness were solid, as if the final step were not the last, but simply the next, as if somewhere below the cliff or beyond it, or in some direction that cameras cannot capture and search teams cannot follow. The walking continues. The prints remain in photographs, documented and measured. The cliffs remain vertical and deadly. The space between footprint and ground below remains empty except for air and absence. And no one has explained where the walking ends, or if it ends at all, or what path continues beyond the edge where barefoot tracks stop recording their passage on Earth that witnesses can see and touch and search without ever finding what comes next. The footprints lead nowhere. They have always led nowhere, and still they appear, walking forward, walking away, walking toward edges where the ground remembers their passing but yields no answers about what lies beyond. Sometimes the sky remembers a different Earth. Petrified Forest National Park spans 93,000 acres across the high desert of northeastern Arizona. Elevations range from 5,300 to 5,700 feet. The park protects one of the world's largest concentrations of petrified wood, fossilized trees from the late Triassic period, approximately 225 million years ago. The Painted Desert occupies the park's northern section, named for the layered bands of red, orange, and purple sedimentary rock. Night skies here are exceptionally dark. The park holds international dark sky status. Light pollution is minimal. On clear nights, the Milky Way appears as a luminous river across the zenith. In August 2005, astrophotographer Daniel Reyes visited Petrified Forest to capture long-exposure images of star trails. Star trail photography involves leaving a camera's shutter open for extended periods, typically 30 minutes to several hours, recording the apparent motion of stars as Earth rotates. The technique creates circular arcs centered on celestial poles, producing distinctive patterns that show the sky's rotation. Reyes set up equipment at Kachina Point, an overlook in the Painted Desert section. He began exposures at 10:45 p.m. under clear, moonless conditions. He captured 3 separate images with exposure times ranging from 45 minutes to 90 minutes. When he reviewed the images the following day, he noticed irregularities. The star trails showed curvature consistent with Earth's rotation, but the constellation patterns were wrong. The circular arcs centered approximately 35 degrees from where Polaris, the North Star, should appear. The offset was substantial and immediately apparent to anyone familiar with Northern Hemisphere star positions. Reyes checked his camera's compass orientation. He had aimed correctly toward true north. The camera had not moved during exposures, but the stars had traced paths around a point that did not correspond to Earth's rotational axis as viewed from Arizona's latitude. Reyes assumed equipment malfunction. He returned to Kachina Point in September 2005 with different cameras and precise alignment tools. He captured 6 exposures over 2 nights. All images showed the same anomaly, star trails centered on a point 35 degrees displaced from true celestial north. In October 2005, Reyes contacted Dr. Margaret Kowalski, an astronomer at Lowell Observatory in Flagstaff. Kowalski specialized in astrometry, the precise measurement of stellar positions. Reyes shared his images and detailed documentation of his equipment setup and alignment procedures. Dr. Kowalski analyzed the photographs. She confirmed that the star trail patterns did not match any valid sky position for Earth's surface. The constellation geometry was internally consistent. Stars maintained proper relationships to each other, but the entire pattern was rotated and offset in a way that violated basic spherical astronomy. Kowalski visited Kachina Point in November 2005 with her own equipment. She brought a research-grade telescope with precision tracking mounts and digital imaging systems. She established exact alignment using GPS coordinates and surveyed benchmarks. She captured long-exposure images over 4 hours. Her images showed the same anomaly, star trails centered on an impossible point. The effect appeared only in long-exposure photography. Visual observation through telescopes showed stars in correct positions. Short exposures under 30 seconds captured normal sky orientation, but exposures exceeding 20 minutes revealed the displaced rotation center. In her field notes dated November 19, 2005, Kowalski wrote, "Camera records stellar motion around rotational axis offset by 35.2 degrees from actual celestial pole. Effect is not optical, not mechanical, not due to atmospheric refraction. Unknown mechanism causes accumulated light from multiple moments to display different geometric relationship than instantaneous observation shows." Between 2006 and 2009, Kowalski and Reyes conducted systematic observations. They tested multiple locations throughout petrified forest. The anomaly appeared only at 3 specific sites: Kachina Point, Tawa Point, and Pintado Point, all along the painted desert rim. At other park locations, even sites separated by less than half a mile from the affected points, star trail photography produced normal results. The 3 anomalous sites formed a nearly perfect equilateral triangle spanning approximately 2.4 miles. Kowalski mapped their positions precisely. She found no obvious geological features connecting them. No unusual magnetic fields, no subsurface structures detected by ground-penetrating radar, no atmospheric anomalies measured by weather instruments. In June 2010, Kowalski presented preliminary findings at an American Astronomical Society conference. Her presentation included comparison images, normal star trails from control locations versus anomalous trails from the 3 affected sites. The response was skeptical. Several colleagues suggested camera tracking errors or coordinate system mistakes. Others proposed atmospheric lensing effects caused by temperature inversions. Kowalski addressed each objection with documented evidence. The cameras were stationary, not tracked. Coordinate systems were verified against multiple reference sources. Atmospheric conditions were monitored continuously and showed no unusual temperature gradients. The anomaly persisted across different seasons, weather conditions, and equipment configurations. One senior astronomer, Dr. Raymond Okafor from Kitt Peak National Observatory, examined Kowalski's data in detail. Okafor specialized in celestial mechanics and positional astronomy. After review, he told Kowalski privately, "Your methodology is sound. Your measurements are accurate. The phenomenon you're documenting is real, but it's impossible. I don't know what to tell you beyond that." No formal investigation followed the conference presentation. Kowalski submitted a paper to the Astronomical Journal in August 2010. The paper was rejected without external review. The editor's response cited insufficient theoretical framework and extraordinary claims requiring extraordinary evidence. Between 2011 and 2015, amateur astronomers and astrophotographers visited the 3 sites after learning about the anomaly through online forums. At least 37 independent observers documented the effect. All confirmed the pattern. Long exposure photographs from Kachina Point, Tawa Point, and Pintado Point showed star trails centered on an impossible rotational axis. In March 2016, physicist Dr. Susan Alvarez from Northern Arizona University proposed a theoretical explanation involving localized space-time curvature. Alvarez suggested that gravitational anomalies might bend light paths in ways that affected time-accumulated observations differently than instantaneous observations. Her calculations showed that extreme mass concentrations could theoretically produce such effects. However, detecting mass sufficient to create the observed displacement would require gravitational sensors far more sensitive than anything available. The mass would need to be concentrated in a tiny volume and positioned precisely to affect only the three specific observation points. No known geological formation or buried structure could account for it. Alvarez's paper was published in a theoretical physics journal in 2017, but received little attention. The proposed mechanism remained purely speculative without supporting evidence. In 2018, the National Park Service was contacted by multiple astrophotography groups requesting information about the phenomenon. The Park Service issued a brief statement acknowledging that unusual photographic effects have been reported at certain overlooks, and noting that various atmospheric and technical factors may contribute to image anomalies. The statement offered no specific explanation and did not mention Kowalski's research. In 2019, Dr. Kowalski retired from Lowell Observatory. She donated her research materials on the star trail anomaly to the observatory's archives. The collection includes over 300 photographs documenting the effect across 15 years, along with detailed technical notes, equipment calibrations, and correspondence with colleagues. In her final research note, dated December 2019, Kowalski wrote, "I have documented this phenomenon as precisely as my skills and equipment allow. The effect is real, repeatable, and confined to three specific locations. It represents either a gap in our understanding of how light behaves in certain environments, or evidence that accumulated photographic time does not correspond linearly with instantaneous observational time. I cannot explain it. I can only confirm that it happens." Between 2020 and 2023, the phenomenon continued unchanged. Astrophotographers still visit the three sites. Long exposure images still show the displaced star trails. The effect remains seasonal, strongest between May and September, weakest during winter months, but present throughout the year. In 2022, a graduate student named Thomas M. Botha analyzed Kowalski's archive for his thesis at Arizona State University. Botha compared star trail patterns across the 15-year dataset. He discovered subtle variations in the displacement angle. The offset changed slightly over time, varying between 34.7 and 35.9 degrees. The variations followed a pattern with a periodicity of approximately 6.3 years. Botha's thesis documented the cyclical variation but offered no explanation. His advisor declined to approve the thesis for publication, citing concerns about peer review reception. Botha graduated but did not pursue further research on the topic. Petrified Forest National Park remains open for night sky observation. Rangers occasionally field questions about the star trail anomaly. Most rangers are unaware of the documented research. Those who know about it offer no official explanation. The three overlooks, Kachina Point, Tawa Point, Pintado Point, remain popular spots for photography. During summer months, astrophotographers set up equipment there after sunset. Some know about the anomaly, others discover it by accident when reviewing their images and noticing patterns that don't match star charts. And every clear night, when cameras accumulate light over minutes and hours, the stars trace circles around a point in the sky that should not exist. A rotational center 35 degrees from where Earth's axis directs it. a geometry that cameras record but telescopes cannot confirm. A pattern suggesting the sky remembers rotating around a different pole, or Earth remembers spinning in a different orientation, or the accumulated moments of time remember something that individual moments do not show. The images exist in archives and hard drives and online galleries, thousands of photographs documenting the same impossible pattern. Stars following rules that match no latitude on Earth's surface. Constellations maintaining their shapes while rotating around the wrong center. Night after night, year after year, consistent and unexplained. And sometimes, looking at those photographs, people notice something else. The displaced rotation center, the point 35 degrees from true north, around which the anomalous star trails. Curve aligns precisely with the position Earth's rotational axis pointed toward approximately 12,000 years ago, during the geological epoch when the last ice age ended and Earth's axial precession occupied a different point in its 26,000-year cycle. The cameras remember an older sky, or the sky remembers an older Earth, or something at those 3 points in the painted desert holds light from moments that existed when the pole star was different, and the axis pointed elsewhere, and the world turned beneath stars arranged in patterns our current epoch no longer sees. The stars don't match. They have never matched. And no one can explain why certain places remember constellations spinning around a sky that should not exist for people standing on ground that exists now, watching stars that shine in their proper places, but photograph as if shining from somewhere or somewhen else entirely. Some things you carry back are not yours to keep. Wet Beaver Creek flows through Red Rock Canyon country south of Sedona, Arizona. The creek originates in the Mogollon Rim and cuts through Coconino National Forest before joining the Verde River. The wilderness area spans 6,500 acres of protected riparian habitat. Cottonwood and sycamore trees line the creek. Canyon walls rise 300 feet in sections. The trail system attracts day hikers seeking swimming holes and scenic canyon views. Cell service is unreliable. Summer temperatures exceed 100 degrees. The Forest Service recommends visitors carry ample water and inform someone of their plans before entering. On June 11, 2016, the Keller family began a day hike along Wet Beaver Creek Trail. The group consisted of parents David and Rebecca Keller, both 42 years old, and their children Emma, age 14, and Lucas, age 11. They entered the trailhead at 8:30 a.m., planning a 5-mile round-trip hike to Bell Crossing, a popular creek access point. At approximately 10:15 a.m., while walking through a narrow section of canyon approximately 2.3 miles from the trailhead, all 4 family members experienced simultaneous hearing loss. The onset was instantaneous. David Keller described the experience in a written statement provided to Coconino National Forest Rangers 3 days later. One moment I could hear the creek, birds, our footsteps. The next moment, complete silence. Not muffled sound, not reduced volume. Complete absence of sound. Rebecca Keller's account matched her husband's precisely. Emma and Lucas provided similar descriptions. All 4 family members stopped walking when the hearing loss occurred. They attempted to communicate verbally, but could not hear each other. David Keller could feel vibrations in his throat when speaking, but perceived no auditory output. The family could not hear the creek flowing 3 feet away. They could not hear wind moving through trees. They stood in absolute silence. The family continued hiking toward the trailhead, using hand signals to communicate. The return journey took 90 minutes. Throughout that time, none of the family members regained any hearing. They drove to Flagstaff Medical Center, arriving at 1:45 p.m. Emergency room physicians examined all 4 patients. Otoscopic examination showed normal tympanic membranes. no visible damage to ear canals, no signs of infection or obstruction. Audiometric testing showed complete bilateral sensory neural hearing loss across all frequencies for all 4 patients. Dr. Patricia Whitmore, the attending otolaryngologist, documented her findings in medical records dated June 11, 2016. Complete bilateral hearing loss in 4 family members with simultaneous onset. No physical abnormalities detected, no trauma history, no exposure to extreme noise, no medical explanation for sudden, profound deafness affecting multiple individuals simultaneously. Blood tests showed no evidence of ototoxic medications or substances. CT scans of temporal bones revealed normal anatomy. Magnetic resonance imaging showed no lesions, tumors, or structural abnormalities in auditory pathways. Neurological examination found no deficits beyond hearing loss. The Keller family was admitted for observation. Over the following 3 days, their condition remained unchanged. Complete deafness persisted. Dr. Whitmore consulted with specialists at Mayo Clinic and Johns Hopkins. No similar cases were found in medical literature. 4 individuals experiencing simultaneous sudden sensorineural hearing loss without identifiable cause was unprecedented. On June 14, 2016, the family was discharged with referrals to audiologists and ongoing monitoring. They returned to their home in Phoenix. Communication occurred through writing and basic sign language. The family learned rapidly from online resources and hospital social workers. Emma Keller maintained a journal during the period of hearing loss. Her entries, later shared with medical researchers, described the psychological impact. She wrote, "It's not quiet. Quiet has sound to it, even if it's just blood moving in your ears. This is different. It's like sound has been erased, not blocked, erased, like it never existed." David Keller contacted his employer and arranged medical leave. Rebecca Keller, who worked as a school counselor, did likewise. The children did not attend school. The family adapted to communicating without sound. Neighbors were informed. Friends visited but found the experience unsettling. One family friend, Marcus Delgado, later told a local journalist, "You'd say something and they'd respond, but the disconnect was profound. They couldn't hear themselves speaking. They couldn't hear you. It created this strange barrier that felt more psychological than physical." On June 22, 2016, at 3:47 a.m., all 4 family members woke simultaneously. Each later reported hearing the sound of rushing water. Not loud, not threatening, simply present and clear, as if a creek flowed through their home. The sound lasted approximately 15 seconds, then faded. As it faded, other sounds returned: the air conditioning system, traffic from a nearby road, normal ambient noise of a suburban house at night. Their hearing had returned completely. The family tested their hearing cautiously. Speaking to each other, playing music, listening to television, everything functioned normally. At 7 a.m., they called Dr. Whitmore and reported the restoration. Whitmore arranged emergency audiometric testing. Results showed normal hearing thresholds for all 4 family members across all frequencies. No residual deficits, no explanation for recovery. Dr. Whitmore's follow-up report, dated June 23, 2016, stated, "Spontaneous, complete recovery of hearing after 11 days of profound bilateral sensorineural deafness. No medical intervention administered. No physiological mechanism identified for either onset or resolution. Case represents unprecedented medical anomaly." Between June and December 2016, the Keller family underwent extensive medical evaluation. Geneticists found no abnormalities suggesting hereditary hearing disorders. Immunologists found no evidence of autoimmune conditions. Toxicologists found no environmental exposures. Every test returned normal results. In August 2016, Dr. Raymond Okafor, a neuroscientist from Barrow Neurological Institute in Phoenix, interviewed the family. Okafor specialized in auditory processing and sensory perception. He reviewed their medical records and conducted his own neurological assessments. In his report, Okafor noted an unusual detail. When asked about the sound of rushing water that coincided with hearing restoration, all 4 family members described it identically, like a creek flowing over rocks, clear water, steady flow. Not rapids, not a waterfall, just a creek. Okafor asked if the sound resembled Wet Beaver Creek specifically. All 4 family members confirmed it matched their memory of the creek's sound before their hearing loss occurred. Okafor's report concluded, the simultaneous onset and resolution of hearing loss combined with shared auditory hallucination at moment of recovery suggests a mechanism beyond conventional medical understanding. The specificity of the hallucination, matching a real location all family members had recently experienced, is particularly anomalous. In October 2016, David Keller contacted the Coconino National Forest Office and spoke with District Ranger Thomas Begay. Keller asked if any other hikers had reported similar experiences at Wet Beaver Creek. Begay checked incident reports. No similar cases were documented. Keller provided detailed information about their hike route and the location where hearing loss began. Begay noted the coordinates and thanked Keller for the information. In November 2016, Begay hiked to the reported location. He found nothing unusual. Normal canyon environment, creek flowing steadily. No obvious geological features that might generate unusual acoustic effects. Begay documented his observations, but filed no formal report beyond routine patrol notes. In February 2017, journalist Susan Alvarez investigated the case for a Phoenix alternative newspaper. Alvarez interviewed the Keller family, reviewed medical records, and spoke with Dr. Whitmore and Dr. Okafor. She also contacted the Forest Service. Ranger Begay confirmed the family's report but noted no similar incidents had been documented before or since. Alvarez's article, published March 2017, presented the case as an unexplained medical mystery. The article included statements from the family and physicians. It attracted moderate local attention, but no national coverage. In June 2017, exactly 1 year after the incident, the Keller family returned to Wet Beaver Creek Canyon. They hiked the same trail to the same location where their hearing loss had begun. They reached the site at approximately 10 a.m., close to the time of the original incident. Nothing unusual occurred. They heard the creek, birds, wind. Their hearing remained normal. They completed the hike without incident. David Keller later told a researcher, "We needed to go back to see if it would happen again, to prove to ourselves it had really happened, but also because we felt drawn back, like something was unfinished." Between 2017 and 2023, the Keller family experienced no recurrence of hearing loss. Medical follow-ups showed consistently normal hearing function. The family continued living in Phoenix. David and Rebecca returned to their careers. Emma graduated high school and attended college. Lucas continued his education. Life normalized. But in interviews conducted in 2022 by Dr. Margaret Kowalski, a psychologist studying medical anomalies, all 4 family members reported the same recurring experience. Occasionally, typically during sleep, they wake hearing the sound of rushing water. Not loudly, not disturbing, just present for 10 to 15 seconds before fading. The sound is always the same, always resembles Wet Beaver Creek, always clear and specific. Emma Keller told Dr. Kowalski, "It's like the creek is checking in, making sure we can still hear, or reminding us it's still there. I don't know which." Lucas Keller described it differently. It's not scary, it's just persistent, like something followed us home and occasionally wants us to remember it's there. Dr. Kowalski's case study, submitted to the Journal of Anomalous Medical Phenomena in 2023, documented the family's experience in detail. The journal rejected the submission, noting insufficient evidence of reproducible phenomenon and reliance on subjective patient reporting without objective verification. Wet Beaver Creek continues flowing through its canyon. Hikers visit regularly. No other cases of sudden simultaneous hearing loss have been reported. The Forest Service maintains no warnings or advisories related to auditory phenomena. The Keller family continues their normal lives in Phoenix, 60 miles from the creek. And sometimes at night, while sleeping in a house where no water flows nearby, they wake to the sound of a creek moving over stones. Clear and steady, unmistakable, present for seconds before fading back into the silence of suburban night. The sound is always the same, always the creek they heard before sound disappeared, always checking, always reminding, always there. And they wonder, separately and together, what it means that silence followed them home from that canyon, stayed for 11 days, then left, but occasionally returns to remind them it could come back. That something in that narrow section of canyon took their hearing and gave it back, but keeps a connection. Keeps returning in dreams and twilight moments to let them know it remembers them. The creek remembers, the silence remembers, and sometimes, in the space between sleeping and waking, they hear both, the water that took their hearing and the absence that replaced it, speaking to them in the language of flowing water from a place they left but that has never entirely left them. The sound persists, the mystery remains. And 60 miles away, Wet Beaver Creek continues flowing through Red Rock Canyon country, carrying water and secrets and the memory of 4 people who walked through one morning and carried something back that occasionally reminds them it's still listening, still present, still there.